Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Lettuce Head Fanfics, back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Had the Damage Control Quirk? Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Applicant, Midoriya Izuku. Quirk, Damage Control. Description. The user emits an aura that abolishes any type of destructive force that can be produced in a radius of 3 kilometers. Requesting, UA Support Department. Status, accepted. Power Loader read this information and felt happy tears pour from his eyes. Mei Hatsum was a promising student, but he was worried about her explosions, so Izuku Midoriya had appeared presenting a perfectly functional and creative support item and had a perfect quirk to minimize Hatsum's damage. God was smiling at him. I'm so excited to start making babies. A girl with salmon-pink dreadlocks and big steampunk glasses enthusiastically exclaimed as they entered the development workshop. Izuku looked at her in horror. What? The girl turned in his direction and started laughing like crazy. Let's make babies. Why else would we be here? She asked as if it were obvious. We would be here to create support items. We would be here to study. We would be here to learn. Anything but doing activities for reproductive purposes. Before Izuku could contradict her, Majima-sensei, a power loader, coughed uncomfortably, and the rest of her classmates saw them the same way. Izuku felt heat rise to his face. I don't want to make babies. He yelled, panicking at the looks. That made them look even weirder. Izuku wished with all his might that the ground would swallow him up and spit him out into a volcano on the other side of the ocean. What are you talking about? The girl screamed again as she went through the tools with incredible fascination. We are all here to make amazing babies with the material UA supplies US. Babies with UA material. UA provides the material to make babies. She calls her inventions babies. The air returned to Izuku's body, and he sighed in relief that he had fixed the misunderstanding. Their teacher's voice cut off Izuku's thought. Context, Hatsum. Majima-sensei ran his hand over his face in surrender. Context. Hey Greenie. Hatsum called out to Izuku as he put one last twist on a nut on a mask with artificial vocal cords that the classroom teacher from Class A had requested for a student with a brainwash quirk. Izuku looked up from his creation and found the girl looking concerned at his invention. Is something wrong, Hatsum? He asked at the girl's expression. She nodded with a pout. There is no explosion, and it's failing. Was that device supposed to cause an explosion? Was she the one in charge of Kaken's hero suit? But Tanako was the one in charge. Izuku had seen the grenade-shaped gauntlets on her work table. Context, please. Izuku asked, hoping to understand her. Hatsum nodded. I always appreciate when one of my babies explodes. It's not nice, but it's proof that something can keep getting better, she said while looking at the created pointer for a guy from the hero course that could generate electricity and that, if he exceeded his limit, it would fry his brain. Failure is the mother of invention, Hatsum exclaimed. I know there is something wrong, but I cannot figure out why. I would need to see the explosion to know which point is the one that I need to improve. Despite all the references to explosions, Izuku had understood that Hatsum was passionate about inventing things, that she adored them, and that she was always willing to give the best of herself and her inventions. Damage control didn't allow explosions, and Izuku was unable to turn it off no matter how much he wanted. He had never had a problem with it. His quirk was capable of keeping any destructive force away, but he always redirected it to another side because chaos always finds a way. Sorry, he said and earned a confused look from his classmate. It's my quirk. It avoids any destruction within a 3 kilometers radius, and I'm not able to turn it off. Hatsum's mouth fell to the ground, and Izuku hoped she would claim him for using his quirk against her. Even though it was unintentional, it had negatively affected his classmate. Instead, she smiled. You would have told me before, Greenie. She exclaimed happily. Then I'll try them after you leave, and you will give me your opinion via video call. Izuku's eyes snapped open at the sudden show of solidarity. Aren't you upset? Hatsum laughed. Annoying? Should I be upset that your quirk can't be deactivated? Nonsense. Only an idiot bothers about quirks. It's not like we can control them at 100%. Or at least the one we have, or even if we don't if you had one. Attacking someone for a genetic code is pathetic. Only an idiot bothers about quirks. Attacking someone for a genetic code is pathetic. Yes, he had the wrong concept of friendship all along. In front of him was a possible chaotic friendship, and he was not afraid of it. What Izuku didn't know was that Midoriya did. The attack on the USJ happened in the second week of school, and everyone had to leave school and go home. For the first time in a long time, Izuku felt that his quirk was a curse. Edward Lorenz, in 1972, had raised the theory of chaos and established the following: the flapping of a butterfly in Brazil can produce a tornado in Texas. His quirk didn't work against that theory. His quirk had repelled every destructive force that might have attacked UA's main campus, but the USJ was far from that range, and Izuku knew that disaster and chaos always found a way. Although, technically, they had been human and not a destructive force. Perhaps, he could have prevented some debris from falling on some of the students, or, perhaps, neutralized some very destructive quirk. Izuku knew it wasn't his fault, but he couldn't help feeling that way. Izuku had joined the support department because he loved helping people, and even though he wasn't the strongest or most agile, he wanted to be a hero. But there are also other ways to be a hero without donning a flashy outfit or fighting villains head-to-head. The support students helped the hero students. They were the heroes of heroes. But at that time, Izuku felt like a villain. What? Higuri didn't believe what his ears were hearing. Nedzu took another sip of his cup of tea and smiled. That Aizawa and can request the presence of Midoriya Izuku in the practical exercises of the hero course and, if feasible, the transfer of the boy to the heroics department. Higuri shook his head and turned to see the heroic teachers. I refuse. He replied. Midoriya chose support, his mother enrolled him in that course, and I haven't seen him dissatisfied with the department he is in. Ken snorted. You only say it because he prevents that girl Hatsum from blowing up the workshop. To a certain extent, it was true, but Midoriya was passionate about support items and got along well with Hatsum, compared to the rest of their classmates who were scared of her. He was a brilliant boy. He didn't want to lose him as a student. And you want him because he will prevent your child heroes from destroying things left and right. He growled, passing his hand over his face. I understand that the USJ has us all nervous, but kidnapping a child from my department won't solve anything. Technically, Nedzu began. Midoriya's quirk is incredibly useful for heroic acts. It would be a shame to waste that potential. Aizawa growled. It's not like we want to use your gremlin, but we think he will be a good addition, although we won't force him to join the department if he doesn't want to. Higuri watched as Vlad King's mouth fell open to object, but Erasure Hero gave him a stern look. We only borrow him for heroic students' exercises and events. Higuri was going to say something before a cough sounded from the principal's desk. The three teachers turned their heads when they recognized that the chimera hadn't been the one that had produced the noise, and they found big green eyes observing them with irritation. You are supposed to be adults, God. Midoriya exclaimed in an annoyed tone. I have a proposal, and if you accept, we will be on the same page. Mineta. Shota entered his classroom, calling for the shortest purple student. The boy turned his head, putting aside his conversation with the human Pikachu, Kaminari guessed. Yes. The boy asked. Take your belongings and go to Principal Nedzu's office. He said, stepping into his yellow sleeping bag. You're expelled. He started to close his eyes, ignoring the exclamations of sadness and confusion from the student, who sounded like he was crying. He only heard Yayarosa's voice saying, thank goodness. Shota thought with amusement that she was thanking the wrong being. Instead of, thank goodness, it should be, thank gremliness. I think a little listener is missing. Hisashi Yamada exclaimed as he failed to locate Midoriya Izuku in 1H's classroom. Hatsum, the girl with pink dreadlocks who had blown up the presentation room during her demo to apply to the support department, exclaimed. Greenie is with Principal Nedzu. Oh, he's with Nedzu, Hisashi thought before exclaiming in fear. What? Poor kid. Surprisingly, the classroom windows were not broken. A red-haired boy, Najima, sighed when he saw the voice hero's confused expression. Midoriya's quirk prevents any destruction within a 3 kilometers radius. Well, that made sense. Hisashi thought. Handsome. Why is Midoriya with Nezu? A girl with brown hair asked. He seriously needed to remember the names of all of his students, not just those of the hero course. The pink-haired girl shrugged. I don't know, I think it was something about a proposal. The quiet and shy Midoriya Izuku was making a deal with the rat dog bear. If there's a god up there, please don't let that little angel make a deal with Satan. Bless you, Izuku said to Principal Nezu as he led him to 1B's classroom. The Chimera nodded. Thank you, Midoriya. To be honest, I was surprised by the proposal you made. Very well planned and organized. Izuku nodded enthusiastically. Thank you for agreeing to all my requirements. The principal shook his head. Thank you for agreeing to be my personal student. I hope you don't run away like the others. Izuku snorted in amusement. With this quirk, the time with Hatsum, running from the bullies and having survived a villain. I assure you that I'll survive. Nezu's smile widened. I'm looking forward to the start of our lessons. Same, principal, same. Izuku replied happily as they both stood in front of the door of first-year Class B. The Chimera nodded and knocked on the ridiculously tall door. Can, he replied in a cheerful and teasing tone. I bring Midoriya. Can Sensei open the door? Good morning, Principal Nezu, he exclaimed, looking at the Chimera. Welcome, Midoriya. Hello, Ken Sensei, Izuku exclaimed. It's a pleasure to join your class. The Class B teacher nodded. As a plus. Nezu called attention. Midoriya still doesn't know Class A, so Class B will be the first to have him. Ken Sensei's calm expression turned into a big smile. Good to hear that you are prioritizing us, Principal. Nezu nodded. Well, I'm leaving you alone. I have to finish Midoriya's paperwork. He finally exclaimed and walked away from them. Izuku stayed outside the classroom with Ken Sensei. Is he too tall or am I too short? He thought. At least I'm not a dwarf like that perverted grape that Aizawa Sensei just expelled. Midoriya. Ken Sensei exclaimed with a smile, come in with me. I'll introduce you to Class B, the best class of heroics. Izuku nodded. He understood that there was rivalry between the two classes of heroics, so for Vlad King, it was like a kind of show of superiority against Class A that Izuku had been sent to his classroom before Aizawa's. Izuku thought. I avoid general education courses anyway. And he enthusiastically entered the classroom while Ken Sensei introduced him to his students' chapter. Izuku took a baseball bat and hit the mirror that Vlad King had brought. The mirror didn't break. Dude, don't be offended. Kamakiri, a guy with a quirk that allowed him to produce large swords from any part of his body, said. But you're a noodle. Izuku snorted. Easy, dude. The last word was said sarcastically. It's not like I can just show you my quirk, please. He pointed to Shishida, the guy with the quirk. Beast. Transform and use all your strength against the mirror. Become as destructive as you can be. Try to break it. The guy nodded and tapped on the mirror. It didn't break. Aways, a guy whose quirk allowed him to fuse things, shook his head. Go ahead, Shishida. I bet it's not normal glass. Shishida tried again, and nothing happened, so he returned and returned and returned several times, even going so far as to launch himself against the object, transforming him into a destructive and bestial force. The mirror remained the same. The faces of several of the B class were stunned. How? Kendo Itsuka, the class president and the girl capable of growing her hands, touched the mirror. It feels like a perfectly normal one. It's even chipped in one part. Izuku smiled. That's my quirk. It's called damage control. To avoid making it long, I avoid destruction within a 3-kilometer radius. 1B's faces showed surprise until a short girl named Komori, who had a mushroom quirk. Like her hair, exclaimed. And are you telling us that you decided to join the support department? Demenit. Minoma quirk. Copy, growled. We can't even touch you. Izuku laughed as he focused his gaze on his notebook. There will be villains worse than me, so find a way to catch me. The students whose quirks were best suited to capture rushed at Izuku. The exercise ended with Izuku stuck to the ground by Bando's quirk, encased in an air dome made by Tsuburaba and with Shiozaki's vines on top of the hemisphere. "My quirk doesn't recognize you as destructive forces," he yelled from within. Among the ranks of 1B students, Setsuna Tokage observed her classmates with a frown. After all, she had been the one in charge of leading Izuku to the sticky area prepared by Bando. "Is it an insult or a compliment?" he asked. "It depends on what kind of hero you want to be," Shota exclaimed, shrugging his shoulders. Tsuburaba made a frustrated sound. "Don't insult me, Midoriya." Izuku was at home passing his notes from Class 1B to clean in a notebook specialized for that class when his phone vibrated. Handsome, the screen brightened for a video call. Izuku pressed accept. The image showed Hatsum with a purple-haired guy in one of the gyms. "You, the guy with the brainwash quirk," Izuku enthusiastically thought as he pulled out the clean notebook from 1A and prepared it to analyze the student. "Greenie!" the enthusiastic girl exclaimed as the boy watched her with a frown from afar. Izuku laughed. "Hi, Hatsum. What's up?" Hatsum snorted. "Call me May." "Greenie." Izuku's eyes widened. "Isn't it kind of rude to call you by your first name when we've only known each other for 3 weeks? Hatsum rolled her eyes. "I hate formalities. They make everything difficult. When you stop worrying about what others think of you, I assure you that life will get easier." Although, like me, she has terrible social skills. She knows how to give good phrases, Izuku thought before nodding. "Okay then. Why did you kidnap a guy from 1A? The guy in question focused his tired gaze on the phone. "Brainwash? For him to test your baby," she exclaimed enthusiastically. Izuku hit his face with his right hand. "May. He has a name, and it's not my baby. It's my invention." "Duh, it's your baby and I know he does," May replied as if Izuku was an idiot. "But my brain has other things to focus on before concentrating on other people's names, so I call everyone with things that identify them." The guy looked uncomfortable at that expression. Brainwash. A powerful quirk. Tamayo of his class had called it a villainous quirk. "It's not like we've had the same experiences," Izuku thought, "but I have an idea. I think if you don't want to remember his name, you could find another nickname for him. Quirks don't identify anyone." Izuku replied. The guy's gaze lifted as if he had heard the greatest compliment in the world. May watched him with a frown. "But it's my way of identifying the Hero Corps students to create items to help them. For example, there's this guy with the electricity quirk. I call him Pikachu." Well, knowing how May was like, he couldn't do much. Izuku sighed and smiled. "Purple boy. Shinso Hitoshi. Right." The guy nodded. "Come closer so I can explain the mask to you." Shinso moved closer, and Izuku could see the big dark circles under his eyes. Phew, Izuku thought, I don't know why, but he seems like Aizawa-sensei's son. Well, conspiracy theories weren't his thing, so he withdrew that thought. "If you created the mask, why is she here and not you?" he asked before adding, "Don't worry, my quirk doesn't work through electronics." Izuku frowned. "I wasn't worried about that." The green-haired guy wrote down that detail in his notebook. "You're studying to be a hero. You're supposed to help people with your quirk. Why should I worry? Or do you have trouble controlling it?" Shinso's eyes gleamed with something akin to hope. A lot of people must have avoided talking to him or accused him of doing bad things because of it. What trashy people, Izuku thought. It's not like people like when I ask things. "Are you bullied in 1A? May asked, putting the mask aside. The guy shook his head. "I have friends in 1A, but before it was not like that, and I have been left with the idea that people are afraid of me." Izuku snorted. "Well, you're a hero student in the best school for heroics in Japan, so take off that CNCPTN and try your support item." Shinso smiled slightly and May gave him the Before putting it on, Shinso turned to Izuku. "You didn't answer the question. If you created this, why is she here and not you?" May smiled hugely. "Because I put the finishing touches on it, and Greenie keeps us from knowing if something goes wrong." Shinso frowned. "How so?" My quirk avoids any destructive force within a radius of 3 kilometers. If I were there with you, we wouldn't know if the mask is perfectly ready to use. And that's why, the 1A student asked in a sarcastic tone, you avoid destruction. It's not like the mask is going to explode. Mei started whistling, and Izuku looked at Shinso with a whelp grimace. Shinso looked between the mask and the 2 students from the support course. It's not going to explode, is it? He asked. It was obvious he was scared. Mei snorted. There is a 1% chance that it will make a small explosion, but the risk is measured. It will only leave you with slight damage in your vocal cords that will heal before the sports festival. Shinso turned to Izuku. Can't you try it somewhere or with someone else? Izuku denied. It's specifically designed to activate with your quirk, so let's just cross our fingers. Shinso gulped and put on the mask. Move the controls on the sides to change your voice and ask Mei a question. Izuku said. Shinso did the indicated shakily. Mei, do you call your inventions babies? The voice that came out was a slightly higher version than the guy's original. Mei smiled and replied enthusiastically. Yes. Fortunately, there was no explosion. Some quirks are considered invisible. Some quirks are considered subtle. And some quirks arise out of a traumatic experience. For the first, we could speak of those that don't manifest externally or that require an extremely complex activation mechanism. For example, resistance to heat without any external physical mutation that sustains it and that only becomes visible when they were going to burn you alive. There's no way someone in their right mind would put their hands on fire, hey, pun intended, to test if they're heat resistant, or if you were to say, hey, I foresee 5 minutes of tomorrow's future, there is a possibility that they will send you to a psychiatric hospital. The seconds would be things like changing eye color, being able to stretch your fingers a few inches more than average, etc. The set of quirks commonly known as useless. And then there are the third ones. People who possess them are commonly diagnosed as quirkless and go through a situation of great negative emotional charge for their activation, or the quirk was so dangerous for the user's health that the body itself suppresses the factor. People realized that Izuku Midoriya had a quirk when he was 5 years, 3 months, and 14 days old, when on a school excursion, a villain attacked in front of his school group, and to escape the heroes, he used his quirk against a building for distraction. It was later revealed that the subject's quirk was called earthquake, and allowed to recreate the movements of earthquakes up to medium intensity on solid objects for an average of 10 minutes. The point is that the building did not fall. It should not be a surprise in a country like Japan. The buildings are built to deal with great forces, but it was shocking because it was an old and abandoned building, which was going to be demolished the week after the event due to being in danger to fall apart. People automatically believed that Izuku had a protection quirk, a kind of invisible shield that would protect him. He was considered a hero, although he had not been on purpose. Specifically, he had broken the law by using a quirk in public spaces. He had not even thought about being a hero. And then it happened that a few seconds later, at a radius of 3 kilometers and 1 centimeter, a building collapsed. They didn't immediately link those events. It was only until his mother took him, with her savings, in front of a man whose quirk allowed him to identify quirks so that he could give them all the details. The man said there was no reason why Izuku's quirk would cause a domino effect. It was more than Izuku nullified the destructive force, not redirected it. People didn't believe it. They said that they lied no matter how much they showed the certificate and began to blame Izuku for the disasters that occurred outside their range of 3 kilometers. So they kept the description vague to avoid lying in the quirk record. The children were not friendly, due to the rumors they had heard from their parents. Disaster Izuku Midoriya's quirk. He was kind of lucky that he got to make some friends. The rejected had to stick together. And he had to admit it when Kaneo talked about her life. He had it better than quirkless people. Society was just trash, or at least people who idealized heroes. Izuku wanted to be the hero of those heroes who risked their lives and did it for nothing more than the simple desire to help. But if people didn't let him help, how could he? Du. Bakugo Katsuki yelled as soon as he saw Izuku sitting on the purple dwarf's old desk. What the F is a villain like you doing in the hero course? Izuku shrugged, seeking to get smaller and smaller. Bro! A red-haired boy with many spikes that made him look like a triceratops, along with sharp teeth like a shark's, spoke. Can't you see you're scaring him? Bakugo growled. Not your business, shitty hair. Deku is AF villain because his quirk is AF danger to OF society. The attention of the kid heroes was focused on Izuku, and he wished he had never proposed this deal to Principal Nedzu or stayed with Class B. No one there had discriminated against him because of his quirk, less by calling him a villain. He heard a cough, and all eyes were directed in that direction. Shinso Hitoshi was at the door, next to a girl with a bob haircut and rosy cheeks along with a tense-looking boy who reminded him of Ingenia miniature. And more robotic version. What did you say, Bakugo? Shinso growled, approaching the blonde with the explosive quirk. Bakugo's hands started to sparkle. You don't care, eyebags? The mini Ingenium approached, walking robotically and making exaggerated gestures with its arms, such as cutting the air. It is not like student heroes to say such atrocities. Especially from a schoolmate. Much less, threaten a classmate using your quirk. Bakugo ignored the boy's scolding. It's not your business what I do or say. Nobody in the room moved, but Izuku saw expressions of confusion, fear, anger, pity, and disappointment for the redhead. Shinso got even closer. He was a little taller than Bakugo. He looked at him with those tired eyes and asked again. What were you saying to Midoriya? Bakugo yelled in the direction of the redhead. Shitty hair. I told Deku to go where he came because this isn't his place. He's avoiding Shinso's quirk. Izuku thought as he watched the purple-haired boy's expression darken. I was not going to use my quirk. He clarified. But this denotes that you're an arrogant quirkist who only is here because he was able to destroy robots with incredible ease. I wouldn't be surprised if you hadn't gained rescue points while others entered by helping others. You'll never understand those actions because you only want to be a hero to use your quirk legally and vent your anger against people. I pity all that criminal or villain who'll face you, and it is not a compliment to your strength. Shinso said the last word as if they were poison. Bakugo grunted, and before anyone could do anything, he lunged in the direction of the purple-haired boy with explosions coming from his wrists. Shinso didn't flinch, the pink-cheeked girl put her hands on his face, and the Ingenium boy had run in the direction of the teacher's room to get a teacher. The rest of the students watched the scene terrified. He even heard a lament of, I couldn't ask him out on a date. The explosion happened but Shinso was unharmed. Du. Bakugo yelled about to lunge at Izuku when Aizawa-sensei's capture cloth engulfed him. The Erasure hero's eyes glowed red as he looked at his student with an annoyed expression. Bakugo, Nedzu's office, now. He growled as he threw Bakugo out the door and slammed the door in the blonde's face. There was a scream and then furious footsteps away from the room. Shota grunted, looking at his students. Shinso stood with bloodshot eyes brimming with anger, Uraraka in the shape of a ball on the ground, some breathing heavily from shock and others simply watching with a blank expression. Midoriya, his part-time student, was hunched over in his assigned seat, his head tucked between his legs and their legs perched on the desk. I'll have a talk with Bakugo, he thought, feeling like a new migraine was starting. Shinso! Uraraka shouted, scared and coming out of the ball state. Are you okay? The explosion was quite strong. Go see recovery. Girl. Shinso simply shook his head. He didn't have any scratches. What the hell? Kaminari yelled. He's fine. There's no damage in the classroom. The students began to talk among themselves, making a scandal that Shota didn't intend to deal with. Silence! He growled, activating his quirk. In 3 seconds, all the students were in their seats. Midoriya, he said, and the green-haired boy looked up. Yes, he asked quietly, looking at the floor. Forgive the welcome from Bakugo. In my classroom, that kind of behavior and comments are repudiated. I hope you don't create a preconception of the rest of the Hellhounds. He said in a calm voice and went to the rest of the classroom. This is Midoriya Izuku from the support department. He will join us in certain classes. The eyes focused on Midoriya. He raised his hand shyly in greeting. The classroom exploded into friendly greetings for the newcomer. Even the stoic Shinso put his hand on Midoriya's shoulder. Already lots of talks, be quiet, he yelled. The room fell silent. Midoriya, do you want to say something? He asked, hoping the child would say no. The boy nodded before standing up. As you said, Aizawa-sensei. I am Midoriya Izuku from the support department. The reason why that Bakugo's explosion didn't generate damage is my quirk. I can nullify destructive forces, or at least their effects on everything in a range of 3 kilometers. I hope we get along well. Shota crawled into his sleeping bag, waiting for the inevitable. What? 80% of his students yelled. Midoriya can nullify destructive forces. He thought, exhausted. Why doesn't his quirk recognize these children as one? If his quirk could shut them up, Shota would let Midoriya sleep his entire class. Izuku? His mother asked when she saw he wasn't at school. Aren't you going to UA? It's the sports festival. Izuku shook his head. He didn't want to participate. Being a student used as damage control due to his quirk gave him certain freedoms. Especially, the fact that participation in the sports festival wasn't mandatory for anyone who wasn't on the hero course, but it was a tradition, and no one had refused to challenge it. Or at least, no one until Izuku asked Nezu if he could be absent that day. The Chimera had nodded. In addition, the sports festival was a show where the weaknesses of the children, heroes of the future, were exposed to thousands of people among whom could be villains. He still didn't understand the reason behind showing that they couldn't break the spirit of UA, despite the villain attack on the USJ thing, but Izuku wasn't the principal of UA, so he just refused to participate. Besides, the viewers will be guaranteed all destruction. Also, Aizawa-sensei won't have to use his quirk on me during every battle to get people to see children hitting each other with their quirks like quality television. His mother didn't seem very sure, but she nodded anyway and went to work. Off UA offered after the sports festival allowed Izuku to upgrade a few of his support items for extra credits in Majima-sensei's class. He was also planning some new ones to help his friends from the hero course. The pointer that Mei was designing for Kaminari had gone through his hands to add a few things. He was working on the specialized fiber to give Hagakure a suitable hero costume, perfect for her invisibility. Also, he was designated to make a perfectly functional capture scarf for Shinso as Aizawa had requested. He knew that when he returned to classes, there would be offers from the support companies for the students to do their internships. Mei had announced Izuku during her participation in the sports festival, mentioning him in each item that they had invented and improved together. So, most likely, he had a few internships ready, and if he didn't, he could simply select some of the support companies on UA's list. Many people might brand Izuku as lazy, but he, actually, worked hard at his education. It was just that there were some events and situations he preferred to avoid. General ed classes were a waste of time, so he took lessons with Nezu, who developed his analysis. He didn't want to be a hero, so, during his attendance at hero course, he spent his time analyzing students to create better support items. After all, he was a happy support department student. Heroics was just extra credits. When Monday arrived, people kept mentioning the sports festival. Bakugo was the main topic, about how amazing he had been at beating Endeavor's son. Shinso had lost in the one-on-one matches, having ended up facing Ida, who just ran and pushed him out of bounds without allowing him to say peep. Uraraka had gloriously lost to Bakugo with a solid strategy that, sadly, there was no match against the brute force of the blonde boy's explosions. Monoma had faced off against Yaoyorozu. The recommendation student didn't get a chance against the fast thought of the blonde from 1B. Monoma, using Yanagi's poltergeist, pushed the girl out of bounds before she finished creating something. Tetsu and Kirishima had been like idiots beating each other their entire match. It was an endurance fight, so they had to go for a second round to break the tie. Kirishima won. Finally, Bakugo had beaten Todoroki in an explosive and destructive match, occupying both first and second places respectively. If I had been there, it would have been so boring. Izuku could die of happiness. We will meet David Shield. Mei enthusiastically exclaimed as she waved her letter. Izuku nodded. It will be amazing, he said. A week away from having to avoid heroic kids' destruction. Mei laughed. Top technology for my beautiful babies. Izuku nodded happily. At last, just support. He felt Ida differently when he got to class. Uraraka? He asked the gravity girl who had strangely acted since she had decided to go with Gunhead for her internship. What's wrong? With Ida? She gave him a sad look. Didn't you hear? Izuku shook his head. I haven't been paying attention to the news. I had a lot of projects behind schedule. Uraraka nodded as she took her phone and showed it to him. Hero killer strikes again. Ingenium added to the list of victims. Turbo Hero announces his early retirement. Sheet. He whispered. The internship week arrived. He and Mei were accompanied by Power Loader to the airport. Midoriya. The man grabbed him by the shoulders. I trusted you to prevent Hatsum from exploding the island. Izuku laughed at his teacher's occurrence. Just pray that explosion doesn't have a radius greater than 3 kilometers. The man turned pale and shifted his hands from Izuku's shoulders to Mei's. Promise me that your explosions won't exceed a radius of 3 kilometers. Mei began to laugh for a while, taking away the startled faces of the other passengers boarding the plane, and then she calmed down. I don't promise anything. She exclaimed with a maniacal smile and turned to get on the plane. Izuku sighed and said goodbye to his teacher. If only Izuku had known the nightmare that would unleash in Hosu a few days later. It was my fault, Izuku said as his eyes looked at the laboratory floor. Melissa Shield, daughter of Dr. Shield, handed him a glass of water. It's not your fault if you didn't cause it. She replied. Cause-effect principle. Mei nodded. She's right. You didn't send Hero Killer. Izuku sighed and looked at them with empty eyes. But I could have been there to avoid it. It was Thursday, 1:15 a.m., and Izuku was in a catatonic state with Melissa and Mei sitting to his sides. The week had started well. He and Mei had arrived at I Island with every hope of spending their internship week surrounded by the best of technologies, meeting one of the world's brightest minds, and being able to develop and improve their support items. They had met Melissa the first day. The girl had received them in the airport and had taken them to her father's workshop. They had talked with Shinso and told him about the improvements they were making to his voice changer. On Tuesday, they had spent the whole day in the workshop and had gone to eat ice cream in the afternoon while Melissa showed them I Island. On the day of the tragedy of Hosu, as the media called it, Izuku had spent the whole day with Mei and Melissa while they were talking about the hero students and their participation in the sports festival. In addition to the big publicity stunt of Mei by using Ida as a living mannequin. Ida was dead, the hero killer had killed him, and it sickened him that he had laughed at him for that Mei's trick. Ida's dead. Mass destruction in Hosu. Ash and debris covered the city. Nomus. 5 civilians were killed. A hero, native, was also killed. If I had been there, Izuku thought, feeling sick again, if I hadn't been so selfish. All his life, people had declared that Izuku's quirk was too good to be true. They had told him that there had to be a consequence. Neutralizing destruction without a side effect was ridiculous. There must be a domino effect. It wasn't possible. A butterfly flaps its wings in the Amazonian jungle, and subsequently a storm ravages half of Europe. Chaos theory had always been a benchmark for his quirk, no matter how much his quirk advisor and specialist had denied it. If small things caused great tragedies, would annulling destructive forces bring about the end of the world? They had all repeated it to him. At least until Yue. There, the teachers believed him when he repeated the specialist's words. He was a kind of independent student from the support department. He attended Heroicos to prevent those guys from destroying something or getting hurt. He attended support to create more items and sometimes even business. Although, Izuku couldn't help but feel uncomfortable in the heroics department. Even though most of the students were kind to him, he felt like they used him because of his quirk. A quirk he wasn't comfortable with. They had told him that his quirk would save lives. Izuku didn't want to be a hero, or at least, not the type of heroic students were prepared for. But he felt that he had to become one. Because his quirk suggested that. All those who didn't believe that had any relation to the chaos theory supported that view. A heroic quirk, The possessor must be a hero. Izuku wanted to be a hero? The internships were cancelled after Hosu. The school asked for a week to mourn for Ida. At the return to classes, there was a ceremony honoring the student. The same day, Izuku finally submitted his official transfer request. "Are you sure, Midoriya?" Majima-sensei said, looking at him worriedly. "You don't have to be a hero if you don't want to." Izuku sighed and looked up at his teacher. "But I have to." His homeroom teacher shook his head and invited him to sit down. "You don't have to. If you feel comfortable here, don't quit." He sat down. Izuku's eyes had found the floor of the workshop, his head lowered and his body trembling. Tears threatening to leak out of his eyes. "I could have saved him," Izuku said with his voice cutting. "If I had been there. If I had accepted the proposals of the heroes dash. But you didn't have to." Majima-sensei clarified, bending down. "You chose support. This is what you want. You're more than your quirk. You aren't obliged to do anything you don't want." Izuku sighed. "But I want to do it." And it was true. Even though he didn't want to be a hero, he wanted to help people, and if his quirk was made for that, then Izuku would accept it. He would have to replace his dream and adapt it to reality. He served better on the battlefield than behind the scenes. His teacher ran his hand across his face. "Because you feel like you're forced to." And it was also true. He liked to think that quirks didn't define people, that everyone could be whoever they wanted and use his quirks however they wanted. But Izuku didn't have many options. A quirk that can prevent destruction, being used by someone who designs support items instead of rescuing people from disasters or preventing them. It was the equivalent of having a healing quirk and not engaging in the field of health. He felt hypocritical for having told Shinso that quirks were unable to categorize themselves because Izuku was doing it to himself. Even so, he didn't consider brainwash as villainous but as a dangerous quirk, just like Bakugo, Uraraka, Ashido, Todoroki, or any of the hero kids. "And for that I must," he said finally. "Please, pass my transfer request to Principal Nedzu." He was giving up his dream. For the common good. Majima-sensei observed him with pity. "You know that you can come whenever you want. The workshop will always be open for you." And he thanked his teacher for those words. He had friends at support. May had been best friends with him throughout their time at UA, and he regretted not being able to work as partners anymore. Majima was the best teacher he had ever had. The support department was the best of all. It was fun, outrageous, loud, and the only course willing to fail with its head held high. Izuku nodded. "Thank you, Majima-sensei." "Thanks for everything, workshop." "I decline." Shota exclaimed as Nedzu demonstrated Midoriya's request. "And you should too, and don't even tell Kansas." The rat smirked sarcastically. "Why would that be, Aizawa?" Shota growled. "Midoriya is fine in the support department. He's only transferring because he feels guilty about what happened in Hosu. He rejected the requests of some professional heroes whose agencies were there." Nedzu observed him curiously as he sipped his cup of tea. "And who do you think you are to question the choice of a student? As far as I know, you also suggested his transfer to heroics after the attack on the USJ." He knew that it was going to explode in his face. Shota, along with Kan, had proposed that the presence of Midoriya in their classes would avoid disasters, his quirk used as a security measure. Shota was embarrassed to have done that. The stupidest decision he could have made. "I made a mistake." He sighed as he ran his hands over his face. "I pressured a child to use his quirk for others instead of thinking about his comfort." Midoriya designed his schedule and proposed it. Nedzu pointed out. Shota growled. But he stayed in the support department as a support student. He was only going to heroics for practices, and even so, it was wrong. Not allowing students to cause destruction will not support them in their development as heroes or realize their faults. The Chimera nodded. "Good point. UA graduates are destined to be exceptional heroes." Shota held onto Midoriya's transfer and tore it in half. "We've been looking for Midoriya to be a hero, and we haven't seen any other options." He pointed out as he walked towards the garbage can and tossed the papers inside. "The child blames himself for everything. He is self-centered, and it's because he seeks constant approval. It's painfully obvious. He remembered a quiet Midoriya in his seat agreeing to speak to a noisy Kaminari, even though he looked tired, to an excited Uraraka hugging him, even though the boy avoided physical contact. How quiet he had been when Bakugo had yelled at him. How bored he was during heroic practices and how focused he had been on that notebook. The boy was selfless in every way. Too much. He had investigated Midoriya and realized how vaguely his quirk's description was in public records, and he had remembered all the specifications Midoriya gave about it. He had talked to Bakugo, and the blonde had told him that Midoriya didn't neutralize but redirected. That was why he called it villainous, as if the boy's quirk was too good to be true. But the specialists had described it that way. That was the quirk. Shota had read that, in pre-quirk times, there had been a pandemic and people hadn't believed in it, claiming that hospital workers and patients were actors paid by governments and that the death toll was false. No matter how hard he tried, humans were illogical. And what do you propose? The Chimera asked. Shota rolled his eyes. Tomorrow I'll talk to Midoriya. But you don't want to go. Mei demanded. But I have. Izuku stressed. You don't have. Shinso said with a stoic expression, you told me that my quirk doesn't force me to be a villain, so your quirk doesn't force you to be a hero. He was a hypocrite. Izuku knew it. I could have avoided many things. He stressed. You're egocentric. Shinso said automatically without a filter. Before you developed your quirk, people were doing the same. After you, there will continue to be. Worry about yourself before others. If you're careless, you won't help others as would you like. Exactly. Mei agreed. You always think of others before yourself, be selfish for once. Izuku snorted. I did what I wanted, I turned down Hosu's offers, and you saw what happened. You didn't send the League to attack the city, nor did the Nomus exist, much less tell Stain to kill Ida. Shinso hissed, annoyed as he moved from his right side and stood in front of Izuku. Don't be an idiot and find out that you can't save everyone. They had stopped. They were no longer advancing to the train station. Mei had moved to Shinso's side, and they were both watching him as if they were scolding him. The purple-haired boy looked annoyed, accentuated by his deep dark circles and his lips pressed in a straight line. Mei was watching him with a frown that was very unlike her. I know you feel that by your quirk. You're bound to be a hero, but you don't want it, and you won't disappoint anyone by choosing you over others. Shinso continued as Mei nodded to each one of his words. He's right. The people who care about you aren't interested in your quirk, but in who you are as a person. Mei exclaimed. Izuku didn't want to cry. But he knew he was crying. You don't have to be on the hero course. Shinso said, softening his expression so that it went from don't be an idiot to listen to me. You don't need a flashy license or a costume to help others. You already do a lot, and you are not a hero student. You don't have to be a hero student. Mei exclaimed. You don't have to attend heroics practices or accept the proposals to work with heroes if you don't want. You're you. You aren't your quirk. And yes, Izuku burst into tears even louder. Shinso sighed as he walked over and patted his back. I'm terrible at comforting, but now. Breathe. He kept patting him like Izuku was a baby. Mei laughed and took a photo. Shinso growled. Delete it. It's blackmail stuff. The girl with the pink dreadlocks shrugged. Izuku didn't stop crying. Shinso growled. Dude, aren't you dehydrated? Is it about my transfer request? Izuku asked while looking at Aizawa-sensei and Principal Nedzu. They were in the Chimera's office, and Izuku didn't know why he was there. They hadn't said anything to his mother when they told her that Izuku should report to UA early to talk about something important. It will be about my transfer, he thought. It was something rushed, but if they already accepted it, I have nothing to do. Yes. Aizawa-sensei growled. It was denied. Really? Izuku frowned. Yes, we consider that it's not something that you want, but rather it's something that you think you should do, a responsibility that's definitely not yours. Aizawa-sensei said, brushing the bridge of his nose. Wasn't that the same thing Shinso, Mei, and Melissa had told him? Maijima-sensei had done it too. No one had blamed him for Ida's death, not even Bakugo, who was the first to point out that Izuku's quirk was villainous. He understood the subject of the domino effect. It was a pretty logical theory, even if they said it didn't cause that. Izuku was something like a destructive energy filter or something. He neutralized it, not redirected it. He tried to mentalize it, but the more he did it, the more self-imposed responsibility appeared. He had read a comic from the pre-Quirk era about a boy named Peter Parker who got bitten by a radioactive spider and had developed arachnid powers. The quote he remembered most was, "With great power comes great responsibility." Izuku had great power, great quirk. Did it automatically give him a responsibility to protect everyone? He tried not to be self-centered about it, not to be selfish with the responsibility of saving people, sharing it with heroes, because he didn't want to be one. Or, at least, a hero like All Might or Eraserhead. He wanted to be a hero like Melissa had described during his internship on Island. A hero who, through items, supported heroes. The strong protect the weak. Which of the two was Izuku? His quirk was able to protect everyone within a 3-kilometer radius. If he were a hero, he could save many people. But he was a vulnerable person. He was more skilled at dodging and escaping than fighting. His brain was his greatest weapon, but it didn't guarantee him to get out of any situation he faced alive. In addition, to include his emotional instability and the complex of martyr that he knew he had. He must have dissociated because Aizawa-sensei's voice interrupted his thoughts. "Child." He blinked to meet Erasure Hero, watching him with a stoic expression that denoted some concern. Principal Nedzu was still sitting, but he was looking at Izuku. "Sorry," he said as he tried to readjust to the situation. "My mind went through the roof." The tired-looking man growled as the chimera nodded calmly. "We were talking about our requesting that you take therapy with the hound dog, that you remain in the support department and with our private lessons, quirk counseling, and training so that you can turn it off." Turn off damage control? He had already tried. The specialist said it was a remote possibility due to the complexity of his quirk, but he hadn't succeeded. He just couldn't. His quirk remained the same as in the beginning. "I can't turn it off." Izuku interrupted. Maybe he was rude, but he didn't want them to waste their time. "I've tried for years. It just stays there." Aizawa-sensei objected. "You've tried it alone. Did you ever get quirk counseling?" Izuku denied. "They said it wasn't necessary." He shrugged as he watched the man run his hand across his face. "There you have it." Aizawa-sensei clarified. "If I can turn it off with erasure, that means it's not a mutation. If it's an emitter, you can turn it off. It must affect you something." "Not that I know of." Izuku admitted. "I haven't been sick or injured since I was 4 years old." Aizawa-sensei's eyes widened in surprise, and then a flash of panic crossed his expression. He turned to see Principal Nedzu, who had a curious expression on his face, and nodded. The man leaned down to be level with Izuku. "Child," Aizawa-sensei said in a worried tone. "Yes?" Izuku asked, confused. The man lit his quirk, bright eyes, and flowing hair. Then Izuku knew that something was wrong because his head started to hurt. His legs went weak. His chest burned. And his consciousness faded. "Well, this is weird," Recovery Girl said. Izuku's mother was sitting next to his bed, while Aizawa, Majima-sensei, and Principal Nedzu were in their own chairs by the door. "What's going on?" his mother asked, worried with teary eyes. What had happened? He remembered talking to Aizawa-sensei and Principal Nedzu in the latter's office. Then the homeroom teacher from Class A had activated his quirk, everything hurt, and Izuku had fallen unconscious. Why did he feel that everything hurt? Recovery Girl sighed as she went through various documents. "Which quirk specialist did you go to?" she asked. Her mother frowned. "To Dr. Tsubasa at Mizudafu General Hospital. He's also a pediatrician." The nurse looked up from the paper she was going through, and a concerned expression crossed her face. "There's no doctor who practices or has practiced in that hospital with that name." "What?" Her mother stood up in shock and asked, screeching. "What do you mean?" The nurse sighed. "What I mean is that your son urgently needs a quirk specialist. Are you hungry, baby?" He heard his mother's voice asking from behind the door. He didn't answer. "Good night, Izuku." How are you feeling, Izuku? His mother asked when the green-haired boy sat down next to her at the table. Fine as always. Izuku replied. He didn't feel like talking to anybody. Izuku wanted to be alone. Her mother sighed. I know it's been a difficult few days. She would repeat the same spiel to him. The same speech she had given him since their visit to the Quirk specialist recommended by Recovery Girl. He was tired of everything. Accepting damage control had been difficult for Izuku due to attacks from people who said that his quirk was too good to be true. So many years of being accused of events that he couldn't prevent. If people thought of him that he was a child like that, Izuku had wondered if someday heroes failed to protect civilians or defeat a villain. Would people turn against him as they had done with Izuku? The bigger your achievements, the showier your failures. But at the end of it all, nothing mattered anymore. People had been right about damage control. Bakugo had been right, but in a much worse way. Izuku snorted. Do you really know? He said before his mind reminded him that his mother was the one talking to him. The woman who had always cared for and loved him, who had dried his tears when he cried. She was there with a regretful expression and thin liquid lines running down her plump cheeks. His heart clenched. Excuse me, Mom, I didn't mean to. His mother looked at him with concern. Izuku, I can't tell you that I understand what you're going through, but I can tell you that I'm here to support you. And then Izuku, for the first time in those weeks, felt his eyes blur, and the tears began to flow. How can you continue to love me knowing this? How can you even continue to consider me your son? His mother got up from her chair and approached Izuku. She was still crying, but her expression was not that regretful of a few minutes ago. Now it was the same look that she gave him when he was a child and played dressed as All Might. Izuku felt the comforting warmth of his mother's embrace enveloping him before sobbing deeply. Because your eyes are still the same as I saw the day you were born, your smile is the same as I saw when I tickled you as a baby, you are my son, Izuku, and I love you, she said, holding him tighter. For the first time since that day, Izuku allowed himself to smile. How are you doing, Midoriya? Shinso asked from the other end of the phone. Izuku sighed. Better, but they need to do more tests. Shinso raised his eyebrows. We missed you and Yue. Power loader is already getting used to Mei's explosions, but she's taking care of your items, I assure you. Class B sends greetings. In other news, I won against Bakugo at Heroics. He exclaimed with an amused smile. Izuku laughed. Did you make him dance hen style? Shinso nodded. And the robot, I'll send you the video later. He looked like a rabid chihuahua. Izuku smiled, imagining Bakugo as a small dog barking at anyone who passed in front of him. It's for the best, I think. He chuckled before noticing how Shinso began to bite his lip, as if he wanted to say something but didn't dare. If you want to tell me something, say it. He claimed, and the purple-haired boy exulted at the sudden scolding. I don't think it can get worse than this. Shinso finally relented and looked at him worriedly. It's too crazy. It's barely believable, and it sounds 100% feasible. With the teacher's permission, he had told Shinso and Mei because they were his closest friends in UA, and he would go crazy if he tried to confront it with only the adults in his life. He needed his friends. I know, it was a shock to me. Izuku admitted. I'm still trying to process it. It makes me wonder, you know? It makes me wonder who I am. You're Izuku, Midoriya. Shinso interrupted. You have a big heart, and you need therapy much more now. You are my friend, and I believe that there's not a single person who's worthwhile, who likes you, that doesn't care about it. He finished with a dry expression on his face. Thank you. He replied with a shrug. But it's more than that, I think. It's that I don't know who I am now. It's as if my whole life had been a lie, but it wasn't. I really lived all that, but... He couldn't find the words to express how he felt. His head and his memories were a mess. All of him was a jumble of problems that appeared one after another. How ironic that, a little less than 2 months ago, he had sworn that he would start the best stage of his life. The opposite had happened. His whole life was deconstructed, and he was beginning to rearm himself in another way. But now everything makes more sense. Shinso continued, and Izuku nodded. It's like you've put glasses on, and you see everything with more clarity and detail. Izuku narrowed his eyes. How the F did you describe it so well? Shinso shrugged. My dad is a psychologist and I learned a lot from it, you know. My quirk requires making people talk and I must know which way works with whom. Izuku nodded. The point is, you put it right, that's how I feel, and I'm so confused. It makes sense that you are. You are simply adjusting to all this new knowledge about you. His friend said while taking a sip from his cup of coffee. But you must remember that you are you. You're Izuku Midoriya, a great person. Izuku shook his head. I don't think so. Shinso denied. You are still a person, no matter what those tests say. Science can be pretty accurate, but there are also things it can't explain. But that's the way it feels weird to know that I'm not a human being, and I haven't been it for my whole life. My mother didn't even know it, Izuku admitted as he started to cry again. He felt pathetic. Shinso growled. But Midoriya, he claimed, looking tired. You're more human than many people I have met, get it? It doesn't matter what that doctor told you or what that crazy person did to you, get it? Izuku Midoriya, UA support student, you're not like those things, get it? Izuku felt the lump in his throat tighten more. You're right. He admitted, surrendering. I'm Izuku Midoriya. I'm a UA support student. Despite that, it doesn't mean that I'm also one of those things. He observed as Shinso planned to refute him, but he decided to continue. Despite everything, even though I'm still me, I'm still a Nomu. Shota was confused as everyone else who was involved in Midoriya's case. Are you telling me this kid should be dead? Tsukachi asked, looking at Midoriya's support ID card. Nedzu nodded. After Aizawa-kun used his quirk on Midoriya, it happened that he began to present symptoms very quickly and fainted. When Aizawa stopped his quirk, we took Midoriya to Recovery Girl. There, his vital signs were stable. It caused us to look at his medical history, and we found several blanks. Tsukachi looked at the chart curiously before frowning. Wouldn't it mean that the boy is in optimal health? That is the most obvious answer. Shota denied while pointing to the blank space that said, Quirk Specialist. But there's no doctor or diagnosis and, according to Mrs. Midoriya, Midoriya-kun went to a specialist quirk, named Dr. Tsubasa at Mizudafu General Hospital, who isn't in any of the hospital records. The detective's eyes snapped open, and he began to reread the history before sighing and running his right hand over his face. Wait, let me see if I understand. He said before taking a breath. Dr. Tsubasa doesn't exist, and he was the one who gave Midoriya his quirk diagnosis, one that, when you deactivate it, almost killed the child, am I right? Nedzu and Shota shook their heads. The Chimera took a sip from his cup of tea before speaking and sighed. After we went to Recovery Girl, Midoriya's signs seemed normal, and when we took him for a more thorough analysis in a hospital, they found this. He said, handing the detective an envelope. Shota had read it earlier, and it had taken his best efforts not to empty the contents of his stomach. From the expression of horror that drawn on Tsukachi's face, Shota knew he had reached the worst parts. Descriptions of how Midoriya's organs seemed not to belong entirely to his body, as if his stomach was too small or his lungs and heart seemed sewn together. Apparently, the boy had been dismembered inside and fixed like a rag doll. How could the child stay alive after everything written there? And it wasn't even the worst part when gagging invaded the detective's body, and he ended up vomiting on the floor. Shota knew he had reached where it indicated that the boy had strange amounts of an unknown substance running through his organism. Also, there was a strange, small, balloon-like organ about to explode. What the hell was that? Apparently, when Shota had used his quirk against Midoriya, that balloon had begun to expand, and if he hadn't stopped in time, it would have exploded. Where the hell is this from? Tsukachi screeched, wiping his mouth with a tissue that Nedzu had given him. It's like the kid was some kind of experiment. Shota ran his right hand over his face. The worst was when we took him to a quirk specialist. Nedzu nodded. He's one of the best out there and a personal friend of mine. He exclaimed before handing Tsukachi a glass of water. Shota growled. Some tests and it ends up being that he has several quirks, Some factors seem modified or crossed, others are there independently. He is a Nomu. Tsukachi interrupted with a blank voice. Nedzu nodded. But he's not like those who attacked USJ. That boy has personality and intelligence. He's a brilliant student. He's a good child. He has friends and helps the students. Shota seconded. He and his mother are being under police surveillance. They accepted an interrogation to dispel all suspicions. Midoriya is not attending UA. He's taking online classes. This is a lot to process. Tsukachi said as he ran his left hand over his face. He seemed to have aged quite a few years. Midoriya Izuku was the boy who almost transferred to heroics because he felt like he had to help people. He was the kid with a damage-controlling quirk that was friends with almost every kid from heroics without any problem. The child who lowered his head every time Bakugo passed him and who had agreed to go home early for Hatsum to develop her items. The student muttered enthusiastically about quirks. Shota couldn't believe he was a Nomu. The child was not like that thing that had attacked them at USJ. He was nothing like that. Even Shota would say that several members of the UA faculty would put their hands to the fire for that child, himself included. If my suspicions are correct. Nedzu began. That doctor should be a step to discover the origin of the Nomus or even the origin of the League. Yagi frowned. So, All for One would be involved with the League. Nao Mesa nodded. The Nomu at USJ had several quirks, you saw it, that thing was not even close to human, that DNA didn't consist of what we saw. His friend nodded. Hosu's Nomus? Same, human DNA, but modified bodies and quirks factors. Nao Mesa explained as he pulled out the Midoriya case file and showed the photo to Yagi. And this UA student, Midoriya Izuku, do you recognize him? Yagi nodded. I've seen him watching some of the training with the heroic students or helping young Hatsum with her inventions. He's Nedzu's personal student, and he went to I-Island for an internship with David, but I haven't had the opportunity to talk with him. Did something happen? Nao Mesa knew that he was taking risks by exposing the boy like that. He didn't know how Yagi would react. All for One was his mortal enemy, and having something close to that villain made the man furious. He sighed. Apparently, the child is a Nomu or something like that. He replied, seeing how his friend's face turned dark. He has several quirks factors, but he said, seeing how his friend began to feel his dinner going up to his throat. God, you didn't read what's written there. It's like the kid is some craft project. He's full of dots inside. The expression on his friend's face was one of confusion, horror, and anger. Does the child remember nothing? He asked. Nao Mesa denied. He doesn't even remember being in a hospital since he was 5 years old. His mother doesn't remember taking him to one after that. It's so confusing, but we have a clue. His friend's expression was replaced by one of surprise, without leaving the horror on his features. Which one? A doctor. Nao Mesa said. The man who diagnosed Midoriya doesn't exist. Let's find him. Have you ever left the country? Nao Mesa asked Inko Midoriya in the interrogation room. The woman frowned, but she nodded. Izuku and I went with my husband a week before he started his new job there. His quirk detected the statement as truth, although he knew it was not what had happened because Midoriya Izuku never left Japan. He never arrived in the United States, only his mother. So there were two options. Midoriya Izuku was in the United States, and there was a problem with the Migration Office of Japan. Midoriya Izuku had stayed in Japan, and his mother had gone to the United States for a week without him, and she didn't remember that she had been alone with her husband. Can you tell me about your husband? He questioned. As far as he knew, the man was called Hisashi Midoriya and had been a resident of the United States for about 10 years. He had a wife and child, but he didn't pass any maintenance for them. According to the migration record, Hisashi hadn't set foot on Japanese territory in some time. His quirk was fire breath. He worked as an accountant for an international company and spoke English, Japanese, Mandarin Chinese, and French. Hisashi Midoriya was a man who was hiding something. Hisashi is a busy man. Mrs. Midoriya said. Always stuck with his nose in accounts, he hardly ever spent time with Izuku, now less with his work abroad. Her voice sounded somewhat muffled and dry. His quirk detected what she had said as truth. Although, if he was sincere, his quirk detected how the person thought about a statement. It was not 100% reliable because memories could be corrupted and modified as truth. Naomasa ran a hand over his face. "Ma'am, how long have you been separated from Hisashi Midoriya?" Mrs. Midoriya blinked before sighing. "Since the week of that trip. We're still married, but after going to the United States, he cut the contact. I have not heard from him since then," she said with her head down. "I didn't say anything to Izuku. I didn't want him to feel like it was his fault that he left us." "And why would he feel it was his fault?" Naomasa asked with narrowed eyes. Midoriya Izuku trembled, her eyes filled with tears, and she let out the breath that she had been holding. Because, some months before the trip, Izuku was misdiagnosed quirkless. And then another piece fell into the puzzle. "What do we have?" Shota asked when Tsukachi left the interrogation room. The detective groaned. She doesn't remember that Izuku never arrived in the United States with her. He said and began to go through his notes. "There are blanks everywhere, and with every new thing, another comes out and enlarges the holes we have." "Sheet." Shota growled. They had been stuck in the case for a month and hadn't been able to do anything to help the child that hadn't attended face-to-face classes. Things had calmed down at UA. Netsu had proposed a dorm system so that Midoriya could return to class without worrying about being kidnapped on the way to school. Whatever the child was inadvertently involved in, Shota knew it was wrong, especially considering his memories of the USJ and thinking about how quiet the League had been since the Nomus attack on Hosu and the murder of Ida Tenya. He should be grateful for the quiet, but something stirred uneasily inside him as if the villains were planning something bigger than ever seen. What if Midoriya could be the key to finding out? The boy had always had to assume a heavy load on his shoulders. A quirk as damage control didn't go unnoticed for good or bad. Some people refused to believe its existence and accused the child of redirecting the destruction out of the 3-kilometer radius. Others would see it as a blessing. From there, Midoriya Izuku had felt pressure to please those who saw his quirk as a good thing. He couldn't give the boy another weight to carry. Enough with what he faced. "Do you know what the worst is?" Tsukachi told him as they approached his office. "Is there anything worse?" Shota asked with wide eyes and a tired expression. He was diagnosed as quirkless at 4 and, apparently, his father abandoned them for it. Tsukachi stated. Shota frowned. "But he has a quirk, or at least, he has a factor." The detective nodded. "The point is, according to what they said, Midoriya-kun's quirk factor wasn't going to activate. He doesn't have the extra toe joint, but it doesn't matter if the factor actives by specific requirements or conditions." He didn't like where that was going. "Are you telling me that damage control, or at least the original quirk, was activated by trauma?" he asked, fearing the detective's response. And he mentally said when he saw how Tsukachi nodded painfully. There we would have a root for his delicate mental state. The detective explained. "His mother's memories must be under a kind of quirk so that she doesn't remember something related to this. Or he has psychogenic amnesia." Shota offered as an idea. Tsukachi shook his head. "She remembers and tells the truth when she comments about it. I haven't talked to Midoriya-kun yet, but I feel like I'm going to get more of the same." Everything was so confusing. The results of Midoriya's examinations had stated that the child's quirk was slowly killing him from the inside and destroying his organs. Otherwise, it didn't explain why those were sewn together or why some of them had been replaced. Midoriya Izuku had not been treated in any hospital in Japan since the age of 5. The strange organ found inside the boy and the black substance were examined through a biopsy. The organ? They couldn't open it. The dark substance? The sample taken to the laboratory detected it as unknown. The child took several operations to keep him in good health, or at least as long as possible since his quirk began to destroy him from the inside. A quirk activated by trauma. Those are the most powerful and destructive. Many bodies suppress them in an attempt to defend themselves. What prompted Midoriya to activate it? "Well done, Midoriya." Majima-sensei congratulated from the screen, holding one of his most recent items. It's perfectly functional. Once it gets approbation, we'll be able to deliver it to Monoma. Izuku smiled. Thank you, Majima-sensei. The man nodded as he set the item aside. How are you, Midoriya? It's strange. Izuku said. Everything is confusing and I can't say that I'm fine, but I know that I will be. Of course you will. Mei's voice snapped out. She had been too quiet for an almost mime-possible time. And when you get to the bedroom issue, we'll eat katsudon while Tired Kun has a very bitter coffee. She exclaimed, bringing the camera to her face. Izuku laughed at the enthusiasm of his friend before shaking his head. I would accompany Shinso having a green tea. I can't eat solids for a while. Mei snorted. I'll make drinkable katsudon, greenie. Izuku made a disgusted face. No, please no. Apparently, Mei was about to say something when the door to the office opened, and Detective Tsukachi walked in with Aizawa-sensei. Izuku sighed. I have to go, Majima-sensei. We'll talk later. Izuku said goodbye with a soft smile. His friend smiled sadly for a millisecond before cheering up again. Take care, Greenie. We talk at night. There's a baby I have in mind for the two of us to build. Bye, Midoriya. Take good care of yourself. Greetings to your mother. Majima-sensei said calmly with a sad smile, which didn't leave his face. Izuku nodded. Thank you, bye. He hung up the call and set his gaze on the two men. Did you finish my mom's interrogation? He asked. Aizawa-sensei nodded. She went out to get some fresh air. It's a stressful situation, he said and approached Izuku while squatting to get to his height. If you don't feel ready, we can move it over for another date. We'll understand. We don't want to pressure you. Izuku would have retired to his apartment a long time ago. He would be in his bedroom, wrapped in his bedsheets. But he wasn't the type to think of him before everyone else. He had always made up his mind that selfishness was wrong beyond the typical good boys can share lessons from kindergarten. His head was in chaos, full of strange, inexplicable feelings of guilt for things he couldn't control or face. Izuku knew that what he was doing was not self-sacrificing, but rather selfishness, but not in the way others told him it was. Izuku was selfish in wanting to take responsibility and the weight for the destruction he couldn't avoid. He was self-centered in assuming he was the only person capable of dealing with all the shit that happened outside of that 3 kilometers radius. Izuku wasn't invincible, and his quirk? Would he keep calling it that? It was less so. More than lamenting lying on his bed, Izuku wanted to know the truth of what had happened to him. Why was he a Nomo? Since when? If he wanted that, Izuku would have to cooperate even when he didn't want to. At least it was nice knowing they weren't going to push him. Izuku shook his head and looked at Aizawa-sensei with determination. Don't worry, he said calmly, and his gaze turned to Detective Tsukachi. I'm ready. It's Midoriya, Hitoshi yelled, waving his cell phone so everyone in Class A could talk to the freckled boy. Upon hearing the name of the honorary member of the hero course, the students headed towards him and swirled around. Midoriya! Kirishima exclaimed enthusiastically. How manly to see you, bro. The green-haired boy laughed. Hi, everyone. How did your exams go? Several laments were heard in the background. Man, Netsu was brutal with us. Kaminari lamented, pointing to Ashido, who made an exaggerated grimace of terror that looked like that pre-Quirk painting of the screaming guy. Ojiro sighed. Your homeroom teacher was even worse, he said. I faced Power Loader and we almost failed, right, Yaoyorozu? The girl nodded. The good thing is that I managed to replicate one of your inventions. It worked perfectly, Yaoyorozu exclaimed. Hitoshi couldn't see the screen, but he knew that Midoriya's face had turned into a tomato red hue, just like Uraraka's when Ashido teased her about her secret crush. Thank you, Midoriya stammered. Good to see almost everyone pass. I thought they wouldn't let us come after our failure. Ashido screeched. Netsu tortured us. Never mind how Cementos exhausted us. Sato noted. Our quirks require stamina. He took advantage of that weakness. He was so manly that he didn't even shed a drop of sweat. Kirishima exclaimed. But not so much that we failed. No mention of Bakugo and Todoroki against Aizawa-sensei. Azui added with a shrug. Kaken failed. Midoriya frowned. He had to be mad. And he's... Hitoshi replied, turning the phone so that his friend could see Bakugo grumbling as he kicked the ground. They had gotten off the bus a few minutes ago, and it seemed that Aizawa-sensei was giving them a break. Hitoshi was deeply grateful to stretch his legs because they had started to get numb. Hagakure nodded. Aizawa-sensei is a tough guy. No Quirk is a match against him. Todoroki, who had been observing the landscape, slowly approached. Hello, Midoriya. He greeted with a raised hand. How are you feeling? Better. Midoriya said quietly. Hopefully, I'll accompany you when the dorms are ready. Hagakure squealed. I'm so excited to be able to live with all of you. We have to do a room competition to see who has the best. She started jumping in her place. Hitoshi denied. I'm not participating, so declare me a loser by default. A series of exclamations surrounded him, and Hitoshi ignored them. Instead, he walked away from the crowd of students, who began to talk among them, and sighed, looking at his freckled friend. How's the investigation going? He asked, running a hand over his face. Midoriya shrugged. A lot of blank spaces. He replied, biting his lip. A lot of information is classified. Neither my mother nor I know. Heroes are patrolling our area all the time. Whatever happened to me is serious. How could it not be? Midoriya Izuku had several quirk factors. They had experimented with him. According to the tests, there were more sinister things. He knew that, and he hoped it would stay that way because the idea made him sick. This boy, Midoriya Izuku, was a Nomu, the freckled green-haired gremlin from the support department. Principal Nedzu's personal student, his closest friend, a person who smiled and illuminated wherever he entered, even though his life had been limited to ignorant people who only knew how to tell him that he had a responsibility that he didn't have. The boy who kept Hatsume's crazy inventions from exploding and was one of the few who appreciated the girl's passion for support items. The honorary member of the heroism course, one of Aizawa-sensei's problem children. A Nomu, like those things that had attacked them at the USJ, like that thing that had invaded Hosu the night Stain killed Ida. Midoriya had feelings. His tear ducts seemed never to end because he was crying with too much emotion. He felt guilt, even for things that didn't concern him. If Midoriya was a Nomu, were there others like him? People victim of experimentation with erased memory and multiple quirks factors? His thoughts about it disgusted him. Thinking of Midoriya like that made him look like that freckled boy was a monster. Midoriya Izuku was the furthest being from that concept. We are on your side, Hitoshi said with determination. The police, the heroes, and us, the students. Midoriya smiled slightly. You're one of the best friends I could have asked for, he exclaimed. Thank you, Shinso. You are also one of the people who exist. Hitoshi. You are the best friend I have ever had. Hitoshi. Midoriya blinked. Ha! Call me Hitoshi, he exclaimed quietly. I think that, since we are both in similar situations of it's not my fault, having this quirk and my life is plummeting, the formality of the last name is unnecessary. His right hand caressed the back of his neck, a nervous habit he had when something made him nervous. The green net blinked again, and Hitoshi got nervous. Maybe he didn't feel comfortable being called by his first name, but because Hitoshi had offered to use his, Midoriya felt that he couldn't refuse? You don't need to do it if you don't feel comfortable. I wanted to express my support and... He said quickly as the words tightened in his throat. He stopped to take a breath. Then he saw the screen, and Midoriya was crying. Then call me Izuku, he said between sobs. I'm thankful that you trust me so much that you allow me to use it. I trust you too. Hitoshi smiled, and Izuku flinched. The boy made a worried face before shaking his head. You spend too much time with Aizawa-sensei, he joked. Or at least enough that you saw him smile like that, and it stayed with you. Hitoshi started laughing. He knew that his classmates were looking at him weirdly because he hardly ever smiled, much less laughed out loud. He was about to counter, but the voice of his homeroom teacher interrupted everything. Kids, Gather everyone, he said stoically, and his gaze turned to where Hitoshi was standing with the phone in hand. Shinso, end your call and come here. Hitoshi growled. You heard Aizawa-sensei. I have to go. We'll talk another day. Izuku nodded. Bye, Hitoshi. Enjoy the camp. His friend exclaimed before hanging up the call. Tracking down the so-called Dr. Tsubasa couldn't have taken them too far, or so they believed until they reviewed reports of missing children. If Midoriya got turned into a Nomo between the ages of 4 and 6, according to Recovery Girl's assumption, he might not be the only one. Perhaps, some missing children had also been victims of the same fate, or even have ended up as one of those things of the USJ and Hosu. Until they found a slight hint of gold for research. If he could explode by emotion, Naomasa would have done it when one of the investigators in charge of reviewing the reports gave him a missing file of about 10 years ago, when Midoriya would have been 5. They went to the same school and the same class. His parents were also missing. He was reported for school truancy. It happened from one moment to the next, according to the lady who rented the house where the family lived. One day, the boy's mother told her they would move the following week and left everything paid. The child disappeared before the move, along with his parents. The family's things were still there. The child's quirk matched that of one of the Nomis that had attacked Hosu. It only remained to see what the forensics said. His mother was an accountant. His father, a salesman. But his grandfather, whom he hardly ever saw, according to the information, was a doctor. We have something. Naomasa exclaimed, lifting the file. Investigators finally took a whack. After the investigation kept driving them down dead ends over and over again, loose parts everywhere. They had something, a clue that could lead them to the life of the false doctor and, perhaps, discover who he really was. Naomasa sighed as he looked at the picture of the chubby-cheeked boy in the file and felt awful for a moment. Had they celebrated a possible connection between that boy and a killed Nomu? But then he got rid of that idea because it was one of the pieces they needed to help Midoriya and anyone else in the same situation and demand justice for those who weren't going to be able to save. One step closer to finding the origin of the Nomus. One step closer to defeating the League. One possible step closer to finally beating All for One. So he decided to have a cup of coffee while letting his fingers run over the boy's name, Tsubasa Ryuka. Dr. Tsubasa diagnosed quirkless to Midoriya-kun, but he was also the quirk specialist they went to. Naomasa said, reviewing the file. They don't remember this either? Officer Makito asked. The detective shook his head. Neither of them remember the specialist's name, only that he had a quirk able to identify quirks. His fee was quite high. Midoriya-kun was diagnosed quirkless at 4, and his quirk developed at 5. The trip to the United States happened between those two PRDs. Naomasa pointed out while marking the dates on the board. The Tsubasa family disappeared when Midoriya was between 5 and 6 years. There were several mysterious moves in that PRD, families with children, and some few disappearances of children in Kamino, Hosu, and Shibuya. The board was full of photographs. Chubby, smiling faces occupying the left side of the board labeled victims. A photo of Dr. Tsubasa took by a local newspaper from a few years ago. They were searching the system for matches, but it was taking longer than expected. Regarding the Tsubasa family, the doctor's wife, Mahito Kano, had died when their son, Tsubasa Meiko, was 4 years old. They had mostly lived in Kamino, but the son moved with his father and his wife to Mizudafu a few months before little Tsubasa Ryuka was born. The doctor would work as a pediatrician at Mizudafu General Hospital for a couple of years, but there would be no written records of him, just testimonials from some of the longest-serving workers and other patients, who were still fully human. Then he would disappear like dust. Thanks to the doctor's family history, they learned that he had worked at Kamino General Hospital as a quirk specialist for a few years, as Hanamoto Saiko. He used to offer free care to quirkless children and orphanages. The identification system is broken. Officer Yuriko said. Naomasa frowned. Why do you say that? The ages don't tally between the matched ones. The woman commented. Show me that. Izuku dreamed of a closed metal door. Izuku dreamed that he was drowning in a strange greenish-yellow liquid. Izuku dreamed that he was scared. And then he woke up feeling his racing heart hitting his chest hard as if it was trying to escape. Izuku couldn't go back to sleep that night. "Good morning, Dr. Ujiko." The nurse greeted him. Kyudai smiled. "Good morning, Nemoto. How have you been this lovely tomorrow?" The young woman laughed. "Perfectly tired. My shift ends in about 6 hours. It's quiet today. Take a nap in one of the break rooms." He offered. "I'll be in my office finishing some of my projects." Kyudai warned. Nurse Nemoto nodded. "I'll let the other staff members know so they don't interrupt you." Kyudai nodded calmly and withdrew to the elevator. He had a couple of interesting orphans to turn into nomes. "What's wrong, Greenie?" May asked, looking up from the map she was showing him. "Looks like you haven't slept in years." Izuku yawned and made a nonchalant hand gesture. "Just nightmares." Apparently, they detected the boy, his master said. "It was a good spy while it lasted. It is still useful, don't despair, master. They don't know what it's. Thanks to it, we have been ahead of them." Kyudai pointed out. "It's a matter of time until they find out." All for One said. "A conscious being was useful while it lasted. Just turn it into a toy for Tamura. It's my greatest success. But that boy is a conscientious Nomu. Nobody identified him in 10 years. If it weren't for erasure, it would have continued in secret until the day it exploded." He explained pleadingly. "Master, I ask you, be patient with the boy. It hasn't reached its potential yet." His master smiled. "So tell me, my dear friend, what would its potential be? More destructive than Tamura?" He said. "It just takes a little more fuel to make it happen." All for One hummed. "And how can you get that potential?" he asked. "Chaos." He said simply. "Let the boy continue with the heroes. Sooner or later, it will explode, and there will be nothing left to prevent you from achieving your goals. Class, it's your turn to be the scarers." Pixie Bob pointed out. "Class B, it's your turn to be scared." In this universe, the League of Villains never attacked the forest training camp. In this universe, Koda Izumi never believed in heroes again. In this universe, All Might never faced All for One at Kamino. But, in this universe, the weight of memories reached Tamura Shigaraki earlier than expected, and this gave way to a destructive force that was prepared to settle on Izuku Midoriya's chest. They just had to wait for the right time. "Izuku!" He heard his mother yelling. His eyes searched desperately for her across the room that stretched out before the glass in front of him. It looked like an operating room. The metal stretcher in the middle, the impeccable medical supplies on a table next to it. There was no doctor, but everything seemed to indicate that there had been one. One that would return. "Izuku!" He was scared. "Izuku!" At the back of the room, the metal door, so imperceptible by its stillness, began to shake violently. Someone was trying to enter. Would it be someone good or someone bad? Help or harm? Amidst his thoughts terrified by uncertainty, Izuku hadn't realized that the door lay wide open. He couldn't make out more than a short, plump figure under the frame. "Hello, Midoriya." Izuku screamed. "It's a nightmare, Greenie. Wake up." A female voice made him open his eyes. He met May's worried eyes. May worried? What the hell? Had his scream been so disturbing? He could feel his ragged breaths, the numbing sensation in his arms and legs continuing. "May!" He screeched. "What are you doing here?" "We heard you scream," she said. "You had a pretty ugly nightmare." He thought. His sight was defocused on his friend, and he turned to see the entire 1H class in the doorway. They looked agitated and sleepy. His eyes began to search around him. He focused on the clock. 3:03 a.m. What were these people in pajamas doing at this time at his home? Until he remembered that he was not in his apartment with his mom. He was in the dorms at UA. The 1H class dorm. "Sorry," he said. "Did I wake you up?" "Only to some," Nakajima said. "Others of us were already awake finishing some items." "Yeah," Hanako said. "UA's second quarter has started, and we'll have to prepare in case the Hero Course kids get their licenses." It was already September, and his friends from classes A and B would be taking their provisional licensing exams the next day. He just hoped Hitoshi would pass. Not that he doubted his friend's abilities to be a hero, but the quirk bias was always present. "So, Greenie, do you want to talk about it?" May asked in an oddly calm voice, very different from the enthusiastic one he knew. Izuku denied. "I just want to go back to sleep." He narrowed his eyes and refused May's offer. "Go back to your business." Some of the guys had already retired. Others remained under the doorframe with concern etched on their features. May shook her head. "I think we need a tea talk." Izuku frowned. "Really? A tea talk?" The pink-haired girl nodded. "I may love making babies, but I also enjoy a nice cup of tea." "Why?" Izuku asked. "Because I'm not allowed to have coffee," she exclaimed with her arms up before shaking her head and sighing. "Besides, you need to talk about it." "You haven't slept well in days," May said. "You haven't told me all the details, but I know you dreamed about it, right?" After making sure their classmates returned to their respective rooms, they went downstairs to the common room and made tea. They both knew they would not sleep again for the remainder of the early morning. Izuku nodded as he stared at the steaming mug in his hand. "I don't know why I'm just having nightmares now." "The box is opening." The green-haired boy frowned. "What box are you talking about?" "The one that contains Schrodinger's cat," his friend said calmly, taking a sip from her cup. Her eyes focused on Izuku's confused grin, and she sighed. "Your memories of that event are like the cat. The box is psychogenic amnesia. These months have been full of events that happened years ago. Like Pandora's box, too. All those facts are coming back to you, torturing you. But isn't the mystery of Schrodinger's cat whether the cat is alive or dead?" She nodded. "In this case, it would be what happened and what didn't." "And how would you make the difference between the realities?" Izuku asked. "They both live while the box is closed. It's a principle of uncertainty in quantum mechanics for a reason," May argued. "I said it was opening. I never said the box was open." Tamura didn't like how it felt. He disliked feeling like an NPC. Why was the master making him remember that? Why was he remembering that life that was no longer his? Had he failed? Why was he torturing Tamura? Tenko! That voice screamed the name that Tamura had despised. It was no longer his name. He was no longer that child. But it sounded so haunted and affectionate. Tenko! That tone. Accusing and violent. Tenko! The feeling of bitterness crept up his chest. The hands that rested on his body began to suffocate and hold him. Devious screams around him. Regrets. Tamura had never felt guilt since Master had rescued him from the streets. Destruction was his birthright, his right to have a quirk as the one life had given him. Father was holding his features like Tamura had been holding his when he decided to succumb to his quirk's wishes. Decay was an entity on its own, and Tamura didn't mind destroying some things to satisfy it. He enjoyed doing it. Tenko! Hana stood in front of him. Her hand extended for him to take. She was always like this. She was a FING hypocrite. Father didn't like them snooping, but she did. Then Father would punish Tenko for her guilt. Later, Hana would apologize, but that wouldn't erase the marks on his body. Tenko! Tamura hated them. He hated everything. And then it happened. Tenko screamed. Tamura screamed. And all for one smiled. The tragedy struck Yokohama in the early morning. Kamino Ward disappeared. It's that simple, leaving nothing behind but dust. The people, animals, buildings, everything vanished. There are no images or witnesses of the incident. Some hint it was a villain attack, others, a movement of some terrorist group. It's unknown. We could speak of a kidnapping or mass murder. Nothing is clear. We cannot deny or assure anything. We're waiting for investigations to reveal discoveries over time. Only one thing is sure. Japan is on red alert. Don't you dare. Hitoshi growled. Izuku frowned. What? Blame you for that, Greenie? May replied as her hands moved frantically. You don't even have a reason to be there, so you have no excuse. But wasn't going to do that. Izuku said. I was just going to say it was mass destruction. Maybe even damage control couldn't have stopped it. Hitoshi sighed and took a sip of coffee. So, you have no responsibility to do so. It would have further damaged your health. Using suppressants makes you feel better, doesn't it?
Yes.
Izuku nodded. The surgeries were successful. Hopefully, I'm only 30% mortally wounded. A few more, and I might not even have to use suppressors all the time. The suppressors had served to prevent damage control from further affecting his body. Apparently, the accumulated destructive energy was absorbed by his body and hurt him. But Izuku had woven into his DNA a quirk that didn't allow him to feel pain and another of minor regeneration. The same damage control kept Izuku from exploding to pieces. So, nullifying it, he couldn't hurt it or absorb anything. Mei squealed and raised her glass of soda. Let's have a toast. Hitoshi snorted and raised his coffee cup. Izuku rolled his eyes and did the same with his glass of water. The pink-haired girl laughed. So our greenie can live in peace and without suppressors ever again. Cheers! Hitoshi exclaimed with a slight smile, and the three of them clinked their drinks. All this quiet felt strange. The nightmares kept taking him. Mei or Majima-sensei always came. But recently his teacher had been away for a while. So, Cementos had replaced him. The poor man's expression upon learning the extent of Mei's destruction had been memorable. Little more, and he started crying as Majima-sensei had done in the first weeks of class. Izuku sighed. How are the work studies going? He asked Hitoshi. The boy shrugged. I don't know, but Uraraka, Azui, and Kirishima are on something with the big three in Nitai's agency. Mei's eyes snapped open. There will be a raid, right? They are not allowed to tell us anything, but Aizawa-sensei is involved, even All Might. Hitoshi added. Kaminari told me that someone shot at Kirishima but that, thanks to his quirk, there was no damage. Izuku sighed in relief. That's good, but now curiosity is killing me. The purple-haired boy nodded. Getting a license but no work study, too bad. Mei frowned. I thought you would go with Eraserhead, like in internships. Hitoshi groaned. Me too, but he's in that case and doesn't want me to go. His head hit the table. Too bad. Izuku said, patting him on the back. At least you can say that he cares about you. He threw us off a cliff. His friend uttered with his head on the table. His caring has limits. Something new? Naomasa asked. Tahanaka nodded. The Kamino thing is similar to what Shigaraki did. If we compare the USJ to this incident. Naomasa sighed. The HPSC was trying to hide everything that was happening from the media. People didn't need to be terrified. They had to keep morale strong. At least, for the moment, because the revelation of the existence of Nomus was disturbing in some sense. Something like this could trigger the fall of order and panic in the population. It meant that they didn't have many resources. There's movement in the mountains, according to a few witnesses. Kurojairi is looking for something. The woman said, pointing to the screen and showing some coordinates, if we knew what it's, we would go and take it before it got it, but it would also be productive to catch the League's escape. I think I have the perfect person for this. Naomasa exclaimed and started looking through his contacts. Finding the name, he sighed and pressed the button. He waited a few seconds until the person answered the call. What? The voice replied. Sorry for the inconvenience, but we need your help on this, Gran Torino. Izuku dreamed of a boy whose hair looked like a cloud. A positive presence that reassured him. A presence that had vanished after the doctor had taken him away. I'm Oboro. Can you tell me your name? Izuku. Tell me, Izuku. How did you end up here? I dunno. Me neither, Izuku. Me neither. The next day when Principal Nedzu called Izuku to his office, outside of his usual personal lessons, he knew it had to do with his quirk. Child. Aizawa-sensei, waiting in front of the door, greeted. Morning. Izuku smiled. Good morning, Aizawa-sensei. They were both in awkward silence for just a few seconds until the door opened, and Izuku could see his mentor standing underneath it. Behind him was Night Eye, All Might's former sidekick, along with Detective Tsukachi and a short elderly that he couldn't recognize. Come in. The chimera indicated. We have some matters to talk about. I refuse. His mother said on the phone. You know how delicate his situation is, and you intend to expose him to a ridiculous amount of destruction. He still lacks surgeries. Night Eye sighed. We are sorry to ask Midoriya-kun for this, but he's our only option in the raid. Only option? Aizawa-sensei growled. The quickest solution, you say? The most efficient. The man in the suit corrected. Midoriya-kun is key in our victory with Chisaki and the rescue of little Eri. Izuku coughed. I think you forget that the person you are talking about has an independent conscience. He exclaimed. I know it's dangerous, but I really want to help Eri. Izuku. His mother's voice was heard over the phone. The doctors said you should rest. Do you know what you risk doing this? Ma'am, let's promise you dash, Night began. His mom wasn't going to let him finish that sentence. It's not what you promise me. It's what I know. We're not even close to finding out what happened to Izuku, and he's been recovering from what damage control has caused him for a few months. Do you really think I will put my son's life in danger? Agree with Mrs. Midoriya on this matter. Aizawa-sensei added. Midoriya is a student under our care. His well-being is our highest interest. So, risking him for a raid, no. He knew that he still needed to recover physically. But there was a chance to help someone like him. A little girl who was living a hell. A worse hell than the one Izuku had lived through. I want to help, please, Izuku asked. Mom, they're experimenting with that little girl. I can't stand idly by when I know I can provide support in rescuing her. It's a no, Izuku. His mother said firmly. I'm really sorry, but I'm not going to lose you. I won't be the one to take you on a suicide mission. And the matter ended there. Or at least that was supposed, because he just needed to be a little closer to where the raid would take place. They had had him under strict supervision, but to be honest, it only took a slight explosion from Mei to distract their homeroom teacher and give him a chance to escape. Mei hadn't liked his idea, but after Izuku begged her on his knees and promised that he would try not to die in the process, the pink-haired girl agreed. On the other hand, Hitoshi wasn't that flexible and was accompanying him. If Aizawa finds out about this, I'm expelled. His purple-haired friend wailed. But if I don't come with you, you'll do something stupid. Better safe than sorry. Izuku shook his head. You were able to tell Aizawa-sensei. You would have come alone, anyway. I'd better accompany you and brainwash you, so you don't do anything you might regret later. His friend replied, shrugging. And why didn't you brainwash me before coming here? Izuku asked, blinking. Hitoshi groaned and hit his head on the table. Knowing you, my brainwashing would work a few seconds before you figure out how to get out. Izuku hummed in agreement. We just have to wait. Izuku whispered as he looked at his phone. Hitoshi sighed as he drank his coffee cup. How will we know when it's happening? He asked. I'll feel it. Izuku replied, shrugging. The media couldn't explain it. When the police questioned Hitoshi, neither could he, even though he had been extremely close to the site where Izuku literally had exploded in incandescent white light. I should expel you for this. Aizawa-sensei growled. Also to Hatsum, but I need you to explain to me why you let Midoriya go, even though he didn't have permission. Things had turned out worse than he had imagined. The worst scenario was Izuku in the hospital, but he would never have thought that his friend would end up exploding in white light. That term might be an exaggeration, but it was the best way his shocked brain could describe what had happened. Greenie was going to do it anyway. Hatsum said without hesitation. If brainwash hadn't been there, it would have turned out worse. I'm an expert at blowing things up. I know what I'm talking about. Despite the informality of his language, Hitoshi could see how Aizawa-sensei understood, then turned his dark eyes towards him. What happened? He asked the same question that everyone had asked Hitoshi. The same thing that I already repeated like 5 times. Hitoshi growled. We're a few kilometers from where the raid would happen, and everything seemed happening normally. We kept an eye out for a Hatsum device, and something strange happened with Izuku. He said before pausing. His voice broke in that part of the narrative of the events. He began to shake. He sharply inhaled. Then he told me that we had to evacuate people who were not going to stop even if we exceeded 3 kilometers. So you decided to brainwash nearby people to run away. Aizawa-sensei said. Hitoshi nodded. The human brain is so social that it will seek to follow the group. When the rest of the people saw the group run, they followed it. He replied while running a hand over his face. After that, Izuku. Run, Hitoshi. I can't stop it. He asked me to run away. I couldn't stop him. He continued, feeling a lump in his throat. Hitoshi, run. Please. And then you ran. Aizawa-sensei finished for him. Hitoshi nodded, lowering his head. I didn't know what else to do. Izuku looked so scared, and I could feel static in the air. He replied with a shaking voice. I left him alone. Sensei, what kind of hero does that? Aizawa-sensei shook his head before putting a hand on his shoulder. It would have been worse. He said firmly. You did what was best. Midoriya knew that. He's too smart a boy to know that that was the only one option. Did he say, he is? Is Izuku alive? Hitoshi asked. He had assumed that his friend had died after seeing that explosion's destruction. His classroom teacher nodded. He's too stubborn to die. He joked dryly. So no expulsion? Hatsum had been too quiet, something strange for her. Hitoshi had forgotten that she was there. Because I have to see some babies in. No expulsion but punishment. Aizawa-sensei replied with a dry and tired expression. I can classify what you three did as one of the biggest, stupidest things I've had to deal with in my entire teaching career. He said while he was running a hand through his hair. Hatsum, you will not be able to attend the practical lessons of the support course, much less participate in the sample they plan for the school festival. Also, you will have to clean the 1H dorm by yourself for a week. Hatsum widened her giant eyes before hitting the floor. What? I'll clean the dorm for a month, but don't take my babies away from me. Talk to my Jima if you wish to negotiate. Aizawa-sensei said before focusing his gaze on Hitoshi. Dorm cleaning for a week, as well as a suspension and no participation in the school festival. Thank God, Hitoshi thought with relief. It could have turned out worse. And not participating in the joint training with Class B. He finished firmly. But it didn't matter, no more than Izuku. Will he recover? He asked the man. His homeroom teacher nodded. We already know a little more about what they did to his body. We can have a better deal with damage control this way. Hitoshi exhaled air that he didn't know he had been holding. Can I see him? He asked. Another day. Aizawa-sensei replied. His mother can only visit him. He's in intensive care. Do you know something, little Izuku? The doctor asked. Izuku shook his head. He was scared. Your quirk would have killed you sooner or later, that's why I prefer to modify it. You don't want to die, do you? Izuku frantically shook as his small, slender limbs were tied to the cold metal table. He didn't want to die. Then you will have to collaborate to avoid it. Izuku nodded without understanding the entirety of the doctor's words. But what was he going to do? He hadn't left and Oboro hadn't returned since the doctor took him away. Pain washed over him before he could process what doctor was about to do to him. All for One smiled at the news. Kyudai looked at him with relief. So this is the potential for the destruction it can generate? The man with multiple quirks said with satisfaction after seeing the damage report. Damage control. Such an ironic name. Kyudai nodded. I told you, Master. It's an important asset to your grand plan. Which we will have to delay due to Kurojire's incompetence. He growled. He couldn't get to Gigantomachia before the heroes captured him. The doctor shook his head as he ran a hand over his head. Couldn't you just call him out? I don't want attention, the man declared. We will have to leave this to Tamura and his league. Kyudai hummed weakly. It's not from questioning his decisions, Master. He said quietly. But is young Tamura the right one? He's unstable, to say the least. Chaos is necessary, my friend. All for One exclaimed contemplatively. Big plans have long delays. But those delays create opportunities that were not present in the original version of these, making them more effective. Soon, he would hold his creation in his hands and enhance it to serve Master in a whole new way. Conscious but unable to refuse orders. Smart enough not to fail like that Basify at USJ, a slip on his part. Soon Izuku, he thought, Soon you will be back in my arms, my creation. So that strange unexplained organ in the biopsy was the one that accumulated destructive energy. Gran Torino commented as he read the file. Tsukachi nodded. The damage would have been colossal if Midoriya hadn't been present. But more was generated where he was. The hero frowned. Weren't there any victims? Not mortal. Tsukachi replied. Property damage, yes. Crowd or debris injuries, yes. But nothing that requires severe action or reprimands for Midoriya. We should be grateful that Shinso-kun accompanied him. The youth of today are so reckless. Gran Torino ummed, running a hand through his hair. Midoriya didn't even want to be a hero, and there he is, trying to save the day. Tsukachi snorted before running a hand over his face and making an exasperated sound. This is a serious problem, and we had a worse one with Kurogiri. The hero nodded at it. A lot of tests are making to him, but he's not in the database. He just doesn't exist. Do you think he is under the control of the League? The detective asked. Rather, I think there's a high probability that he's not even capable of exercising free will. Gran Torino replied. With all this, it wouldn't be crazy to assume. Tsukachi used to consider himself a man capable of connecting the dots in any situation. But this case was a mixture of everything. The League was related to all for one in some way. Midoriya Izuku had been one of the doctor's victims. What are you talking about? He asked. I'll wait for the results. The hero replied. If he's what I believe, I'll tell you what I think and the course of action we'll take. Memory is one of the most complex processes developed by the human brain. It goes through different stages to achieve its mission. Sometimes it can be stunted by some traumatic event that will erase everything related. That's psychogenic amnesia. It was diagnosed to Midoriya Izuku and Midoriya Inko. Though, the probability of a memory-altering quirk was still there. So when Izuku started having strange dreams related to a room full of tanks, a creepy man, a guy with cloud-like hair, and indescribable pain, he knew it was his unconscious trying to release those memories. Izuku kept them to himself. It wouldn't be real if it stayed in his head. Nothing would have happened if he didn't tell. But the shot backfired. He exploded. He wasn't a Nomu like the one which had attacked the USJ. He was a bomb in the literal sense. A human body that had been killed and brought back to life. How did he know? He could see his own death, or at least what he assumed was the light at the end of the tunnel before he was thrown back to hell on earth. What's going on? His mom asked in a shaky voice, holding Izuku's hand. No one answered him. Midoriya Inko was left unconscious in an alley a few blocks from the airport. Her son didn't know what to do. He was small and lean, shaky and nervous enough that his words were incomprehensible to anyone other than his own head. Before he could get a person who would hopefully follow him to where he had left his mother, the door of a car that passed opened, and hands grabbed hold of him. Izuku was weak. Izuku was very thin. Izuku was very small. He had no strength to break free, much less a chance to flee when held captive. They didn't even allow him to scream before a cloth covered his mouth and nose. Everything went black after that. The light returned when Izuku realized that he was no longer on the street next to Hitoshi but in a hospital. What? He grunted, trying to get out of bed. Bad decision. His body howled in pain, and his back hit the mattress again as his head against the pillow. Midoriya? A hoarse voice said in the room. His clouded vision began to clear to meet Aizawa-sensei's face. Sensei? He asked, confused. What happened? I was with Hitoshi and Dash. You exploded. The man finished the sentence. Midoriya, you exploded. The realization hit Izuku quite hard. He remembered people screaming, a white light, and the fear in the air. Oh. He contested. How many people did I hurt? The hero sighed. None directly. He pointed with his fingers on the bridge of his nose. Indirectly? But none dead or serious. If you were my student, I would have already threatened you with expulsion. Hitoshi had commented on it. It was one of Aizawa's sensei's logical ruses. The expulsion that wasn't an expulsion. Izuku laughed lightly. I feel like a truck ran over me. He complained, a hand on his forehead. Aizawa-sensei hummed. It will be because you exploded, I don't know. Seriously? Izuku looked at the raven-haired man with narrowed eyes. Sarcasm? The hero shrugged. You could call it a little comeback after the tremendous recklessness you did, in which you involved Shinso and Hatsum. Hitoshi and Mei? Izuku's eyes widened as he remembered that he had entangled them in his awful planned operation. They won't be expelled, will they? Aizawa-sensei shook his head. Even though you three did one of the worst violations of school rules, you saved lives. So just arrests and bans, but they'll be fine. Izuku's head was still an absolute mess. But something was wrong. Why don't you call the nurse or a doctor? He asked, looking at the man. Aizawa-sensei blinked in confusion before his creepy grin slid across his face. But that made his nerves kick in because it wasn't the baby-eating smile the man used, and it wasn't scary. It was toothy and strangely familiar but not on the man's face. Because I'm here, Izuku. Aizawa-sensei's voice was choppy as an awful recording. And then Izuku knew from where he remembered that smile. Did you miss me, Izuku? The doctor asked. How the F, did you lose a child? Aizawa Shota yelled as he hurried through the corridors of the hospital. Where the F is him? Sorry, sir, but we don't know where. The nurse said nervously, tears starting to peek out. A doctor said heroes had granted permission to check Midoriya's vital signs. He said they had sent him from Jaku as a replacement. Shota grunted. The police and the commission ordered that only authorized people could visit the child. In addition to nurses like you. No one else. But he showed me everything. The nurse screeched, tears streaming down her cheeks. Everything was in order, I swear. I didn't know this was gonna happen. Sheet. Shota growled. He ignored the rest of the nurse's pleas and cries and left the hospital. Everything was an absolute disaster. He pulled the phone out of his pocket and dialed Tsukachi's number in a hurry. Erase her head. The man's voice rang out on the other end of the line. How's Midoriya-kun doing? He's not here. Shota replied with a blank voice. He could hear a gasp from the detective. A doctor came in and took him away. Sheet. Tsukachi's frustrated tone rang into the phone. I'll be there in a few minutes. No one comes in or out. Go to the security cameras and see them. We'll catch that a-hole. Shota grunted in agreement and hung up the call. Who would say this year's problem child was not in my class? He said to himself as he walked back inside the hospital. Bakugo Katsuki couldn't remember a time in his childhood when he didn't want to be a hero. Now, Bakugo Katsuki was a student of UA's hero course. Midoriya Izuku wanted to be in charge of the support's items. Something silly, considering his ridiculously powerful quirk. The thing is that people had always seen Katsuki as a hero and Deku as a liar. Was there really a possibility that a quirk of such magnitude was real? Quirks always have consequences, both for the user and others. So, he took the position that Deku was a villain because he assumed that the abolished destruction was redirecting to somewhere else. The issue was knowing where it was going. Katsuki didn't expect it was going towards the nerd himself, threatening his health and life. It's not like he cares. One less potential villain. In addition, the worst came when the news spread through the UA, and they all learned the extent of Deku's quirk. For the first time in that year, people looked at the nerd like Katsuki had seen him all his life. He was no longer the innocent Deku whose quirk protected people. If not as the villain that he could be. The theme was, Bakugo Katsuki no longer saw him that way. What do you want? Eyebags growled as he stabbed his fish. Are you coming to insult Izuku like the others? Next to him was the crazy girl from the support course, a friend of the nerd, who was watching Katsuki with a murderous look. He also noticed that Eyebags had spoken in a series of questions, so he was prepared to use his quirk. So, Katsuki took the small whiteboard that he had brought in case of emergencies and wrote furiously. We need to talk. Eyebags narrowed his eyes, and Items began to laugh maniacally. With you? You blasty. The purple-haired boy nodded. Leave us alone, Bakugo. We have nothing to discuss with you. Katsuki grunted before starting to type again. It's about the Midoriya Izuku. Eyebags replied coldly. His name is Izuku. I've always called him D, so that's how it stays. Items snorted. Greenie has likely forgiven you and accepts that, but we are not that forgiving, Blasty. It is not something that concerns you. The point is I want to talk to Eyebags about D. Name's Shinso Hitoshi, not Eyebags, and I'll agree if May's included. Also, summarize the explanation in a minute. 3. Midoriya Hisashi was a businessman. So he saw the perfect deal when one of the company's underground partners offered him a large sum of money for the quirkless child that Inko had given birth. Izuku had been so perfect until that extra joint in his toe proved he was nothing more than a social burden. One that Hisashi was unwilling to deal with. Inko refused to let go of the brat. So he would have to part with her too. It was a big deal. A quick invitation to America, a passing kidnapping, a few memory-altering quirks, and all was well. When the whole thing was over, Inko and Izuku would return to Japan, and Hisashi would end his life there. America was a perfect place to prosper, and he could do it all alone. He sighed as he read the newspaper and had a cup of fresh coffee that his secretary always brought him. The morning was lovely, preparing for an important business meeting. His phone rang, disrupting the atmosphere. Yes. Hisashi replied. We're going after you, BT. And the door to his office slammed open. Shota Aizawa hated going on missions abroad, but he couldn't deny the satisfaction he felt watching Midoriya Hisashi behind bars. So this is Midoriya-kun's male parent? Tsukachi asked. Shota nodded. The same BSRD that sold his son. The detective ran his hand over his tired face before sighing. This is too much. I need a cigarette. I need Namuri's special mix. The black-haired man commented. Tsukachi shook his head. Save it for the weekend. I need you and Present Mike to join me at the Tartarus. Shota frowned. How bad is it? I know you are not a religious person. Tsukachi started, looking at the chained man. But I think the devil is more merciful than the man we are looking for. It won't happen, Hitoshi said. Bakugo widened his eyes at the answer and grunted. Why not, shitty eyebags? May gave him a look of, really? Because I don't believe a single word that comes out of your mouth. Do you remember how you attacked Izuku earlier in the year? All the shit you've said about him? Everything you've done to him? Hitoshi grunted. How do you want us to give you a hand? Bakugo had been Izuku's bully. The blonde had tortured him before UA, generating that his friend's self-esteem and mental health went to the garbage can. Blaming himself for something he couldn't control and believing he had full responsibility for actions he could have perhaps avoided. So, it was believable that neither Hitoshi nor May believed Bakugo's words. The blonde grunted. Deku. Izuku, May corrected. Name's Izuku. Bakugo nodded with a frown. It was different from the other expressions of the blonde, almost as if he looked ashamed. I've known him since we're in diapers, Bakugo began. We grew up and everyone told me how great I was. No one told me what I did to him was wrong, and I liked it when people complimented me. I'm not good with words. I'm a person of actions. I've been going to therapy with Hound Dog. I admit that I have done wrong. There is no way I can fix what I did, but at least I want him to know that I'm sorry. Hitoshi snorted. To feel better about yourself? Bakugo denied. Because it's the right thing to do, just that. Tell us everything you know about the doctor. Naomasa growled. Midoriya Hisashi had brown eyes and black curly hair. As different as his color palette was, he could see the resemblance to Izuku. The freckles that adorned their cheeks were unmistakable. That made his blood boil more. I'd rather rot in jail than end up in the hands of that guy, Midoriya Hisashi replied mockingly. Eraserhead grunted. Weren't you sorry to do that to your kid? No. The criminal said. That brat is nothing of mine. He wanted to punch the man so hard. His quirk didn't understand figurative. Always literal. That was a lie. What if he was another child? What if he was your child? Aizawa asked. The man shrugged. I refrained from answering that question. Why? Naoma grunted. Must there be a reason for everything? Midoriya Hisashi replied. It's not like there's one to Schrodinger's cat paradox. Eraserhead snorted. Now, do you think you are cryptid or something? Just a human being, the man replied in a mocking tone, something that brat is no longer. And then Naomasa punched Midoriya Hisashi in the face. Like every day since his abduction, Izuku was unceremoniously thrown into his cell. The neat white made him sick and nauseous because he would cover it in crimson after he began to mobilize. Was this what he had experienced as a child? Was this what Eri had experienced before being rescued? He didn't know how much time had passed, but he firmly wanted the doctor to finish him off for good. If he was sincere, Izuku didn't expect to be rescued. He had been turned into a weapon long ago. The doctor had made it clear that damage control absorbed destructive energy and stored it inside for him to release. Not knowing that aspect of the quirk, Izuku had retained too much and ended up exploding thanks to the destruction in the Chisaki raid. The doctor told him what had happened to his acquaintances and what the media was saying. If he believed the man's words, all was well, save for the fact that they kidnapped him to finish what the villains had once started. If the heroes found them, Izuku hoped they would finish him off at once. It was painful to think that way. So many years, believing he was the only person who had to avoid any disaster that happened and that others put that burden on his shoulders. Blaming himself for deciding to put his interests first rather than caring for others. How much had things changed in his story? It was difficult for him to understand how that year had transformed his life. Months had passed, but it had all happened so suddenly and quickly. He was no longer that boy who had decided to join the hero course solely out of guilt. He wasn't that kid who had come to the support course with hopes and dreams, either. He was no longer that kid who kept Mei from blowing everything up or presenting quirk training ideas to Hitoshi. Much less, he was the boy running terrified from Bakugo. That year, he had become Izuku Midoriya. An amnesic child. A victim of quirk experimentation. A child transformed into a Nomu. A child who was what people classified as a monster. He laughed at the irony. His quirk, apparently too good to be true, actually was too destructive to let Izuku free. "How are you feeling, Izuku?" the doctor asked mockingly. The man got entertainment by torturing his victims in this way. He enjoyed the fear that forced kindness generated in the godforsaken creatures he shaped. Izuku had firmly decided that he would hold out until he died. "I feel like new after all those injections." He didn't give a shit if he provoked the doctor's irritation. He also didn't fear death at that point. Did he feel like they were going to rescue him? He didn't think they would arrive in time to save him. He would rather die a painful death than become a version of the USJ monster that Hitoshi had described. "I see you're upbeat," the doctor pointed out with a ghoulish smile. "Would you mind fighting with one of your older brothers?" "This man wants me to fight another of the Nomus." Izuku gulped before nodding with the most sheet-eating smile he put on. "Great. Hitoshi taught me how to hit a good punch." If Shota knew anything, it was the fact that Shinso didn't know how to hit a good punch. Or at least that's what he thought when he looked at the battered and bloody knuckles, extremely noticeable on the student's pale skin. "Child, what the hell happened to your knuckles?" Shinso shrugged. "Hard training." He raised an eyebrow to the child before sighing. "Hard training looks different. If this is training, it's very irresponsible from you, harming your body like this." The boy nodded, his head down, but Shota knew that, as much as regret, he was doing it so that the man won't notice the fact that he had rolled his eyes. "I'll be more careful, sensei," he answered. Shota didn't believe him. "I'll keep an eye on you." Empty threats were useless, according to Aizawa-sensei. He did logical tricks but never empty threats. So Hitoshi guessed that he would have to be more careful if he wanted Mei's plan to fumble. The problem was, it was almost impossible to go unnoticed with someone like Katsuki Bakugo sticking their noses at the guilt he felt. "You are annoying. You are arrogant. I don't like you." Hitoshi pointed, growling at the blonde. "You made Izuku's life miserable, and here you come, as condemned to hell trying to cleanse your sins." Bakugo rolled his eyes. "You want to rescue Deku, don't you?" "Izuku." Mei corrected. "Our friend's name is Izuku. I call him as I want." Bakugo barked like a mad dog, gnawing at the air inches from Mei's face. "You want to rescue him, don't you?" It would be preferable doing it without you. Hitoshi replied, shrugging. Sadly, you're glued to us like a FNG leech. Inko took a deep breath before entering the interrogation room. The table between her chair and the one Hisashi was sitting on was the only division. The familiar freckles, plump cheeks, and curly hair were a painful reminder of Izuku. Just as Hisashi's appearance reminded her son, plaintively and nostalgically. Her heart burned in rage while she remembered that the man had sold their son without remorse. The man had blatantly cheated on her, promising a future as a family living in America. Hisashi's crooked smile appeared, and Inko felt nauseous just looking at it. I hope Tsukachi-san's blow got you to the hospital. She, nonchalantly, commented. Her gaze lingered on the hideous purple-green lump next to the right side of the man's jaw. Hisashi snorted. They should give today's detectives more strength training. That's the reason people like you and Izuku get caught up in situations like this. If you knock him out, it will have been useless for you to come to see him. Get information and knock him out before you go. Don't say his name with that mouthful of sheet of yours. Inko groaned, swallowing her tears. Hisashi had seen her cry many times. He had seen her crying when he gave her a bouquet of roses on Valentine's Day. He had seen her crying when he proposed to her, and they started dating. He had seen her crying when he proposed to her at a beautiful party. He had seen her crying when her PRGNCY test came back positive. He had seen her crying when she gave birth to Izuku and took him in her arms for the first time. He had seen her crying with every new thing Izuku learned. He had seen her crying when the doctor misdiagnosed Izuku. He had seen her cry when they met again. He had seen her cry when they said goodbye. But, too, he hadn't seen Inko cry next to Izuku because of people's criticism and complaints towards him. He hadn't been there for when people came to take Izuku away whenever there was a disaster approaching, and the child cried in the arms of his mother. He hadn't seen Inko cry hugging her little one when he told her about the kids at school avoiding and insulting him. He wasn't there when Izuku had bad days and depression hit hard. He wasn't there when Izuku got into UA, and they both cried with joy. He wasn't there when Izuku quit the support course. He wasn't there when they received the diagnosis from the doctor. He didn't see her cry for her son. So, those would be tears that Hisashi wouldn't see. I'm just here because I want you to answer a few questions. Inko said as coldly as she could. I'm here for you to answer a couple of questions. Hisashi's smile didn't fade. Dead before I give you information, UFA Beach. Inko slowly shook her head as she sighed. We can do this either the easy method or the hard method. She threatened, knowing that Aizawa-san wouldn't mind cutting the camera footage as long as she was in the role of the bad detective. Anyway, it was just the two of them. Do you remember my quirk? The smile didn't leave Hisashi's lips, but she watched as the man swallowed. Pull. He snorted as she nodded. That useless quirk for a useless people? As you and your BSRD child. He's provoking you. If you hurt him, they'll take you out, and he'll take the secret to Tartarus. Organs are considered small objects. Yes, Inko Midoriya would go back and forth from hell for her son. Things change from one moment to the next. That's life's reality. But that didn't mean Hitoshi liked those changes. You're loud. You're annoying. Hitoshi said, interrupting the explanation of Bakugo's plan. To say that he was sick of spending time with the explosive blonde was an understatement, considering the level of disgust and rejection he felt. Bakugo, his eyes bloodshot, growled. So what do you suggest, eyebags? Hitoshi was surprised that Bakugo didn't attack him but only responded with a mildly murderous tone. Follow Mei's plan and not have to deal with your bullshit. He replied, shrugging as he rose from the bench he was sitting on. He walked over to Mei's work table and spread out the plans. Track Izuku based on the electromagnetic field his quirk emits. Hitoshi started, watching Mei nod her head. Electromagnetic field? Bakugo frowned. What does it have to do with Izuku's quirk? Midoriya. Mei corrected. Only Izuku can give you the right to say his first name, so you keep the last name, Blasty. A few weeks ago, Bakugo had approached them, tail between his legs, to propose to join forces and rescue Izuku from wherever he was detained. In the beginning, Hitoshi and Mei had refused the offer because they knew that it was Bakugo's way of trying to shake off the guilt he felt over the years of abuse of Izuku. But as the days passed and the heroes didn't rescue their friend, they had decided that they weren't going to sit idly by. They didn't have enough clues as to what happened to Izuku for him to have ended up being a lab rat, but they refused to leave him behind. Mei was smart enough to devise the tools necessary to rescue him. Hitoshi was the cold, rational head that analyzed the plan's logic. Despite this, they needed brute force. Hitoshi raised many possibilities, from Uraraka to Minoma. Still, they always came to a standstill in which the image of a seemingly repentant Bakugo would appear and propose to go and rescue Izuku. The condition? Bakugo shouldn't call Izuku Deku. They saw it fair enough, but they weren't counting on the ex-bully calling Izuku by his first name. It's not like they could control Izuku's opinion, but he wasn't with them, so they had to take care of guarding him in his absence. Izuku's quirk absorbs destructive energy from his surroundings and stores it. Mei explained to him as she scribbled on the board. This affects the electrically charged particles around it, creating a field that can be identified by the sensor I'm creating. Bakugo's mouth pursed. How have the professionals not realized it? Mei shrugged. Most likely, they've already done, but they're focused on the aftermath of carrying out the rescue. HSPC is not very open to these issues. Hitoshi added. They want to keep society like those pre-Quirk Marvel movies. Heroes win and villains beat. Or in our case, being a hero is glamorous, and there are no such things as human experimentation. Mei commented, because it would be terrifying if society knew everything the commission goes under the table. And it's a lot. From what Izuku told him, Hitoshi knew that Bakugo had grown up, dreaming of being a hero and becoming like All Might. A powerful quirk and compliments on all sides, the boy was a product of quirked society, a society that concealed mass murders and enforced disappearances. The kidnapping of infants for their conversion into heroes, villains, or experiments. The imprisonment of all those who went against its deals. Hitoshi wouldn't have found out about all this if it weren't for Mei's hacking skills. So they won't rescue Deku until the FING Commission assures them they won't send him to Tartarus or experimentation, right? Bakugo asked. Mei hummed and sighed as she walked to the other side of the workshop and grabbed some blueprints from her backpack. Near. She walked over to them and spread the plans on the table. What the heroes involved want to achieve is for Izuku to be allowed to readjust if they rescue him in time. If not, Bakugo grunted, running a hand over his face. How useful is it to keep him alive? Hitoshi replied, swallowing the lump in his throat. How difficult would it be to get him back if there's something to save? Izuku vomited when the doctor left the cell. Today's tests had been brutal, and he didn't know how much longer his body would hold up. He was so tired and just wanted it all to end. In the time of his kidnapping, Izuku had glimpsed a little more of his memories. The doctor explained that they had used a memory-altering quirk on him and his mother, but he didn't understand why it no longer affected Izuku. Maybe it was because Izuku had been so damaged that the quirk no longer worked in his brain. But he didn't care anymore. He just wanted to die. He already knew what had happened to Oboro, and he wasn't willing to become the same thing. To prevent it, he had to die in a way that would render his body unrecognizable. But how could he do that? Generate an even bigger explosion than that of the raid? It wasn't going to be possible. That destructive energy had been accumulating inside his body since that trip to America. Although, if it hadn't been for the crazy doctor who had him kidnapped, Izuku would have died long ago as a result of his faulty quirk. How funny was fate when it decided to mock you through your own life? Damage control hadn't existed for any human being. It would have remained hidden in Izuku's body, unactivated, had it not been for the doctor and his experiments. The quirks developed by trauma seek to keep the user alive in dangerous situations. The strongest attempt of the human body for survival and self-preservation. Despite this, those were the most uncontrolled, so powerful that they hurt their users. After everything he had experienced that year, Izuku was certain why damage control would not have manifested if it hadn't been for the intervention of third parties. There was no chance of him getting out of there. Or at least that's what he believed. Izuku, we have a mission for you. The doctor exclaimed enthusiastically, returning to his cell. Izuku snorted. Who told you I'm going to help you? The maddened smile remained on the man's face. Because you know you will die, and I know you don't want to become another Kurogiri. The doctor had told him in great detail how he had slowly crushed Oboro's spirit, giving him a tiny glimmer of hope when he brought Izuku and then snatching it away when he took him straight to All for One so the man could give him the required quirks. Nausea returned. In a week, I'll send you to some friends to get you ready. Then Izuku realized that he would have a chance to get out. And he wasn't going to waste it. All for One smiled at the hero in front of him. So you wish to cast aside the heroes and join our side? The villain politely asked as he walked around him. Like a caged bird. What a beautiful and exact analogy. The society I swore to protect since the commission put me under their side. Hawks responded in a neutral tone. It's fake. The real one is lost under all the bright daylight heroes. I don't want to be a puppet. I want to do something to change it. He sounded pretty determined. A hero who, after realizing that the world he knew was false, decided to change sides and fight for a transparent and fair society. He had heard of that story before, and the protagonist was enjoying a good few years in Tartarus. A pity that All for One was not a man to fool. Welcome, Tegami Kigo. But he was also a very persuasive man. Welcome to the future. Izuku had faced many of his siblings, but he felt no emotion towards them. He was indifferent to them. Johnny? It was different. Johnny was a small Nomu kept in Doctor's secret laboratory, used to teleport people. He would transport it along with the Doctor's friends. He was like a dog made from human corpses. He even wore shoes. Izuku had been barefoot since the kidnapping. Johnny stood in his doorway, walking happily or at least what seemed like genuine excitement while he made weird noises at him. Go away. Izuku growled. Obviously, Johnny didn't understand. The urge to scream was consuming him, but he had to be quiet because Izuku's chances of freedom resided on the doctor believing he had summoned him. Just a little more. He whispered, hugging himself as he imagined his mother's warm arms surrounding him. You'll get out of here. He told himself, almost hearing the voices of Hitoshi and Mei saying it. It's a promise. And so he fell asleep on the cold floor of a cell, dreaming that he was an ordinary high school student with friends and life ahead. Shota wanted to go to bed and never wake up after the visit to Tartarus. Or he wanted everything he had discovered to be a complete lie and for Shirakumo's ashes to reside in his urn. Despite everything, Shota knew that he had a group of 19 children to take care of and a little girl to teach about her quirk's use. Shota's wishes were nothing compared to the responsibility he had. Shirakumo Oboro got turned into a Nomu named Kurogiri. Shirakumo Oboro was his almost 15 years dead friend. Shota wanted to vomit as Yamada did. Sensei? Shota didn't know that he had closed his eyes until he registered Shinso's voice echoing in the room. He had told the students to seek him out if they needed help or asked permission to leave the dorms. Shota grunted but nodded, indicating the kid to get closer and ask whatever he needed. Anything you need, Shinso? He questioned. The boy rifled through his backpack for a few seconds before pulling out a sheet of paper and spreading it out. Shota received it and realized that it was a request. I request permission to be absent from my academic work for 3 days for family reasons. Shinso responded formally. The application has the signature of my parents and their number, in case you want to verify the information. Shota passed a hand over his face. Although he was so tired, he couldn't help but feel something strange in Shinso's perpetually stoic attitude. He knew that Midoriya's disappearance had affected several students. Shinso was one of the most hurt because Midoriya was his best friend. Both had even gone so far as to call each other by their first names. He could deny him permission as he suspiciously fell on the free week that Bakugo Katsuki had requested to visit Midoriya's mother. After all, the Bakugos were close friends with the Midoriyas, and the mother, Mitsuki, hadn't left Midoriya Inko's side since her son had disappeared. Shinso had been hysterical when he found out that his best friend got kidnapped from the hospital. Same with Hatsum, Maijima's problem child, and strangely Bakugo Katsuki had been too silent. The children were fools if they had not realized that their sudden closeness, poorly concealed, was not suspicious to some individuals, such as Shota and Nedzu. If he refused, they would go anyway and be more careful lest he caught them in the act. If he didn't refuse, he had a chance to fool them and find out what they were planning. It was because of situations like these that Shota preferred not to be close to anyone, especially his students. Shota had too much on his mind, but he was there, paying attention to some children who were possibly planning something suicidal. These children will be my death. He lifted his seal and approved the request. Have a good day off, Shinso. Shota said, watching the boy's eyes widen, impressed that he accepted without much question. Thank you, Sensei. So, based on what you've heard in the underworld conversations, the villains will go to Daika? Bakugo asked, and Mei nodded vigorously. She had been plunging into the depths of the deep web and underground channels of communication. Certain illegalities in order to rescue her best friend. Still, it wasn't like the police were smart enough to catch them at such heights that they had the plan in place. Daika is a particular city, she commented, especially against what is the control legislation. A few years ago, there was a survey to ask about the modification of the Quirk use law. Hitoshi came up behind her and nodded. The majority stated that those laws should be repealed because they go against human rights. Quirks are part of us. Why repress them? Because some can be lethal. Bakugo replied. That's why you have to suppress them. But that didn't stop you from attacking Izuku with yours. Mei pointed, earning a snort from Hitoshi and a growl from Bakugo. If anyone wants to be in control of society, especially in this PRD where it seems that All Might has completely disappeared from heroism, it would be those who are against everything he built. She could see how Bakugo growled something like, All Might can make them mush. Mei internally snorted as she remembered that Izuku had told her that the angry Pomeranian was as much an All Might fanboy as he was. For a while now, All Might had been decreasing his heroic activity. He didn't show up to UA much either, always sending different substitutes. Mei had realized something was wrong when she bumped into him in the hallway and noticed a large amount of blood on her shirt, but the hero quickly denied that it was anything serious and had rushed her back to class. He wasn't a subject of her interest, but Mei had her eye on him anyway. The Detnerat company looks like an ordinary company, but who runs it is a different matter entirely. Hitoshi continued, turning on the projector and pointing at the man they were looking for. Rikia. Yatsubashi is not an important man in the public eye. They had done very well to hide it from the eyes of the law. At the same time, they weren't acting under the approval of anyone, so they would take the necessary courses of action. But his father is, she clarified, flipping through the following image taken a month ago. The name of the villain Destro came to my ears based on the capture of that gentle criminal guy who ruined the cultural festival. Over there, it sounds that one of the most infamous villain organizations has returned under the orders of its heir. Hitoshi hummed as the image of the city was projected. And that it comes to claim its place. Izuku woke up to footsteps and voices approaching his cell, but he pretended to be asleep to catch any relevant information he could pick up for his escape. So this is the big advantage that Master has prepared for us? A gruff, raspy male voice questioned in a disgusted tone that offended the defiant part of Izuku. He could hear the doctor's light humming of assent. Subject is capable of storing destructive energy and releasing it. That's so cool! An enthusiastic female voice exclaimed in a tone that gave Izuku chills. Everything we hate will be destroyed. Toga-chan is right. A male but soft voice complimented the statement of the female, or Toga-chan apparently. That's dangerous. The same voice contradicted itself, sounding more serious and annoyed. He will be able to destroy everything I hate. The same raspy voice answered. He felt a warm, scratchy touch on his side. Are you sure he's alive? He asked again, masculine, a little calmer than the raspy voice. He heard a snort from the doctor. Let the boy rest. Tomorrow will be your big field trip and his debut as a league resource. Tomorrow. Izuku refrained from saying it out loud. He didn't have time. How quickly had a week passed? He couldn't panic. As much as his body wanted to get up from that cold ground and beg to be released, Izuku knew that he was an object in their hands and that his word would only count as a reason for punishment. Tomorrow is my chance. Communications are clear. Hitoshi stood by the table as he spread the map out and began marking Daika. The Meta Liberation Army challenged the League of Villains, and they should be there with some sort of resource. He watched as Bakugo growled, and Mei clenched her fists at how people referred to Izuku. Izuku was a high school student who enjoyed inventing, eating katsudon, watching bad movies, and hanging out with his friends. Izuku was not a destructive circus freak. I know someone who can teleport us there. Mei clarified, tossing out the photo of a woman with black hair and pink eyes. She owes me a favor for taking her off the illegal Quirk use log. Bakugo and Hitoshi nodded simultaneously. We'll get to Daika and try to mingle with the people. Bakugo continued. We already read the FING sheet book and a quick history lesson. Curious calls himself the person who recruited us. Mei complimented, and thus all the pieces of the plan fell into place. Hitoshi extended his hand across the center of the table. The nerves were still there, but the desire to save his best friend outweighed the fears. And we'll save Izuku. Hell yeah. Let's do it. Bakugo answered, joining his hand with Hitoshi's. Mei shrieked and threw her hand into the center. Let's go after Greenie. So, you're just like me. The man with the burns asked him once they were alone in the truck while the others had gotten out to get some fresh air or loosen their legs. Izuku had refused to talk to them. He hadn't made any noise, but Dabi's statement caught her attention, so much so that she got a slight hum from him. Funny that there are people like us, right? As much as in the eyes of anyone the man seemed to be trying to be friendly and empathetic, Izuku could see the malice behind that smile. Dabi would not hesitate to throw any of his allies to the wolves. But Izuku couldn't ignore the burning curiosity of whatever Dabi was referring to. What do you mean with us? Izuku asked in a low voice, trying to sound as meek and docile as possible. Dabi's smile widened even more at the answer. Pawns of all for one's plan that the nutty doctor repaired as rag dolls. Izuku's eyes snapped open. That meant, I'm not technically a Nomu like you or Kurojiri. Dabi clarified, putting a hand to his chin and smirking at him. But I know how it feels knowing you were be saved for their master plan. Knowing that you're unworthy of them. It was years ago to me, but I'm still mad. Kurojiri. The mist man who had used his quirk to take Izuku to the lair during his hospital stay. Izuku hadn't recently seen him. The last time was some months ago on the news. He had almost forgotten the man existed. He felt nausea rise in his throat at the memory. We'll get out of here. I promise you. I'm a hero in training. My friend Shota is super good at getting into dark holes like this. Hizashi is super loud but really intelligent. Kiyama's gonna put all the villains to sleep, so I need you to hold your nose if I tell you. After so many years, Izuku realized who he had been talking about. Aizawa-sensei, Yamada-sensei, and Kiyama-sensei. They had been students at UA around the same time and everything fitted by calculating Oboro's age when they met. I'll be back soon, dude. Oboro had been turned into that thing, having faith that his friends and heroes would save them. The good thing is that we aren't so unlucky, Dabi added, ignoring how Izuku's eyes filled with tears. Although, I don't know which is worse. Living unaware of having lost yourself. Or living knowing that you are not yourself. Izuku shook his head. The worst thing is living without knowing. Then seeing how it breaks before you. You're paying Blasty? The crazy girl from the support department exclaimed when paying for the bus tickets. Although it was strange to see her with a short black hair wig and wearing a light blue dress, accompanied by a daisy crochet sweater, flesh-colored pantyhose, and brown hong boots. Katsuki grunted. And why should I pay? Because we agreed that, remember? Ibags mentioned, pointing out their group chat. He was dressed in baggy pants, low-top white sneakers, a t-shirt with a band logo, a black leather jacket, and a gray beanie that scrunched his purple hair down. Katsuki wore a brown wig and khaki pants with a white shirt under a green sweater with white argyles and brown leather shoes. They looked FANG ridiculous, but they were unrecognizable. Cash. He grunted as he tossed the money at the cashier. Why couldn't Mr. All for One come with us? Toga, the blonde girl with the fangs, groaned as they got out of the truck. This responding to the declaration of war was supposed to be his idea. Izuku was pulled forward by Spinner. Motherfucker. Then you say that mutants are discriminated against, but you treat me like an animal. Instead of saying that, Izuku growled. Don't hurt Zukuen. Toga exclaimed, pouting and approaching Izuku, ruffling his hair as she watched him with a bloodthirsty grin. There's only one, and he's so much cuter than a Nomo. I'm not a blood donor. The doctors declared that. Or that. Gigantomachia abomination. Twice added. This one is more abominable. He dash. Izuku watched as Tamura approached Twice from behind and removed his mask. The man grimaced in horror and sank to the ground as his breathing quickened and erratically repeated sentences. What the F? Twice seemed to be cracking. Tamura gave a speech that Izuku ignored, focused on the suffering villain. When the handyman left the mask on Twice, he could see the man starting to breath again. We have a destination to reach, Tamura declared, and they continued on their way. I have a freedom to recover. Shota wasn't an idiot, even though he sometimes acted like one. He wasn't the idiotic type like Kaminari, who wasn't academically brilliant or told jokes that could be good or bad. Shota was an idiot who acted like a JRK many times, being rude and dressing like a bum, being too strict with his students, and maybe a little cruel. How's it going, Aizawa-kun? Nedzu asked from the comlink. Change. Shota rolled his eyes. I'm following the train. They're near to Daika. He heard a humming on the other end of the line. The idea is that you answer over too. Shota bit his tongue before responding offensively. I'm chasing a few students who might go on a suicide mission. I think we can skip the formality. He answered. Are the others prepared in case everything gets out of control? Nedzu laughed lightly. Don't even hesitate. As much as those three tried to go unnoticed, Shota was not stupid. It had been sudden, but Tsukachi had summoned Shota and several heroes to plan an operation at the last minute. All Might had been present as a large number of heroes. Hawks had suddenly appeared and pointed out that he had to pretend to kill Best Genius to be believed, showing the fake corpse to the villains so that they would finally reveal the details of their sudden excursion to Daika. Everything had been so fast. They didn't have time to organize anything, so they only had to gather as many heroes as possible and prepare them for an imminent confrontation. That FING traitor. Beside him, Endeavor grunted as he watched Slyden go signal to the train to not pass. Thanks to Hawks, they had discovered several of the front's allies. Also, on that train, there were the children. Shota felt the air returning to his lungs. Then you can arrest him and unleash your anger if you want, Shota told him without caring if the man was angry or not. For this time, let's try to remain inconspicuous. The train stopped abruptly. What's going on? Hitoshi asked. Mei stretched to look out the window. Slide and go is indicating that Daika is closed. Bakugo snorted behind him. Locked? What kind of joke is that? From his claim, several passengers joined, demanding to be let through because they had things to do, people to visit, jobs to do, among others. The hero, noticing the scandal inside the bus, looked out the windows. It was their chance. Hitoshi leaned out the window and made the signature pledge of the Liberation Army. Mei realized this because she grabbed Bakugo from behind and dragged him toward Hitoshi. The blonde, noticing Hitoshi's action, approached the window from the seats before them, taking advantage of the fact that the rest of the passengers were on the other wagon and made the same sign. Mei did the same. The hero's eyes widened even more as a smile appeared on his face. He responded in kind and approached the bus. Got it, Mei whispered. Izuku walked through the empty city streets and felt a chill run up his spine. What the F is going on? Twice whispered to Toga. It looks like a ghost town. Businesses were closed, windows covered, not a single soul passing by, and only accompanied by white noise. It was so fast that they were unable to prevent it. One moment Tamura was speaking, and the next he was slammed against the wall. What the hell was that? Mr. Compress shrieked. Someone coughed behind them. They all turned around and found a man dressed in a suit with purple glasses, slightly long hair, and a calm smile standing on a bus. Behind him, there were hundreds of people, and Izuku was sure there would be more people preparing in other areas of the city. The power of a true army. The man smiled. After going through the protests of several passengers, they were following Slide and Go. I remember you from the UA Sports Festival. The hero pointed, and Hitoshi nodded. I'm surprised you're here, considering you never showed any signs of supporting us. Why the costumes? Here is the questioning. Shoda. We still want to help from within. Mei lied. They gave us days off, but they always follow us. Hiding our identity was the best option. And how to help from the inside? The man asked. We're trying to get information from UA. Mei responded in as calm a voice as she could manage. Didn't you guys get our anonymous tip? The hero hummed lightly. Pretty useful, although we had considered other informants. He pointed carefully. You three are a surprise. Outstanding students from UA's most well-known departments. You'd be surprised what a little reading can open your eyes. Blasty said confidently. I was stuck in the lies of heroes and society until I found the motivation of my life. Titan, Go laughed lightly after hearing the excitement in Bakugo's voice. And what would that be, young Bakugo? Use my quirk freely and allow others to do so. Blasty convincingly exclaimed. After all, he had believed that for so many years until he decided to be a better person. They wanted to hold me, but I refuse now. Same with me. Hitoshi joined the conversation, realizing that he had been silent for a long time. I was called a villain for a long time. I stayed silent, terrified of what could happen to me just by saying a word. Destro's ideology helped me understand that my quirk is part of me and that I am free to use it. We sound so convincing. We should form a drama club. And you? The hero asked directly to her. Mei widened her smile even more. My friend, Izuku, was always singled out for his quirk. One that wasn't bad, but people assumed. She came clean, knowing that a lie was more convincing if it wasn't completely untrue. They wanted to force him to be many things because of his quirk. She remembered Izuku thinking about dropping out of the support course or being called a villain. We should be able to choose who we are regardless of our quirk. A moment of silence was established. Mei hadn't realized that she had begun to cry. Slide and Go gave them a sympathetic look as he clapped his hands enthusiastically. Magnificent. Simply beautiful. I feel how Destro's ideology changed their lives. It's so touching. A voice did not allow the hero to finish. A laugh was heard alongside. Destro would be proud. The man turned to face the owner and placed a hand on his chest as he leaned down. Hitoshi's eyes widened, as did Bakugo's, and Mei realized that those voices were familiar to them as mimicking the action. Slide and Go looked up. A pleasure, generals. I'm escorting some members to the city. Are you ready to fight for liberation? Monoma and Kaminari smiled together as they watched them. We're screwed. Get back to your place. Monoma said calmly. We'll take care of the new ones, right, Denki? Absolutely, Nito. They ended up sitting on a chair, with their hands tied and quirk cuffs on their ankles. It's a shame we have to treat you like this. Monoma crossed his arms after seeing the death glares that Bakugo and Hitoshi gave them. You realize we're technically on your side on this case, right? Mei snorted. You guys are alongside Redestro's army. What's it like to be on our side? Kaminari rolled his eyes. Looks like they're less intelligent than we thought. He pinched the bridge of his nose in obvious irritation and extended both arms towards them. Playing the flirtatious idiot was useless if my data wasn't too precise. A shame. It's not like intelligence is measured by the educational system, Monoma argued. A school full of professional heroes and smart people, but none of them noticed the family records or where they came from. You're from Saitama, Kaminari. Hitoshi grunted. We met at the entrance exam. You were in the row in front of me. Kaminari snorted. Dude, I'm from Saitama, but my whole family is from Daika. Didn't you connect the dots when I mentioned how cool Stain was right after he killed Ida? He put a hand on his chest, feigning outrage. I know the guy had to stick up his butt, but what kind of incoherent idiot mentions such things? And the fact that you, Hitoshi, told me how highly emotionally intelligent I was, I thought you'd be the first to notice my unconventional affiliations. Hitoshi was never too close with his classmates, but he got along with everyone except Bakugo. Kaminari, particularly, had been one of the first people to approach him and call him a friend. So he was hurt by the revelation. So you two are the UA traders? Bakugo questioned. Both boys raised an eyebrow, looked at each other, shrugged, and looked at them. The UA trader? Minoma replied, stifling a laugh. We don't know who that rat is. Neither of us is on the side of the League. If we were the UA traders, would we stand with the army that declared war on the League of Villains? Kaminari said arrogantly. That's why we say we're on your side, as long as our objective presents some parallelism. Our goal is to beat the League of Villains. Minoma pointed out, and your goal is to save Midoriya, who, oddly enough, is in their power. Kaminari hummed. What we want, it's not far away. He slowly approached Bakugo. Besides, Midoriya is our friend. Saving him is a plus for our main objective in this lovely city. These two are crazy, he thought as he struggled with the ropes, but these crazy people say things that make sense. Then what? Bakugo barked, biting the air. We helped you in this little war. We got Deku back, so what? We let you effing bistas get away with it? Like we've affected UA in any way. Minoma pondered, resting his elbow on Mei's head. Yes, we pass information, but to make sure the little heroes don't get in our way. It's not like the real traitor who passed on information for the League to attack you. Kaminari agreed, stroking his chin. I repeat what I said. We are on your side. But then we would collaborate with you, Mei exclaimed with a tired tone. How will we explain it? How are you guys going to explain Midoriya's rescue? Minoma argued. We were going to say we went hiking in the mountains near here, Hitoshi replied. We were going to call in the heroes once we got it and dash. So were you going to wait until Midoriya was rescued before warning the heroes and preventing a catastrophe, potentially capturing the villains? Kaminari asked mockingly and let out a laugh. That's a terrible plan. And I'm the idiot. Shut. Bakugo screamed, lunging forward and falling to the ground face first. Shut up, dunce face. But it's the truth, Baku bro. Kaminari slowly said as he sat on Bakugo's back. You guys are desperate, right? Never show weakness. It was something that Aizawa-sensei had told them a lot. But this was their only option. Yes. Hitoshi hissed, tears brimming in his eyes. We just want to save Izuku's sheet. We just want to save our friend. He watched the incredulous looks of Mei and Bakugo out of the corner of his eye, but he needed them to sympathize with them, with their motives. Only then would they get out of that situation and could expose the infiltrators. Although it would be useless because neither Minoma nor Kaminari were the ones who had passed the UA information to the League. Help us save Izuku and we'll have a deal. Bakugo snapped, knocking the words out of Hitoshi's mouth. We help you against the League, and then we'll take Izuku to the hospital. He offered, nodding at Mei as. She repeated the gesture. We'll find a way, but we can't save him if we're here. Kaminari and Minoma raised their eyebrows together at the genuine desperation and pleading in Bakugo's face and voice. He must feel like shit for treating Izuku that way after so long. We have a deal? Mei questioned. If Izuku were asked to describe the League's performance against the Liberation Front, he would write things like disappointing and lackluster. This is the difference between people with vision. He thought about the citizens of Daika, and a makeshift circus. The League of Villains appeared in his thoughts. Shigaraki complained he felt sick. Dabi kept fighting with a guy who manipulated ice. Toga was being destroyed by a reporter, and twice was being chased by his apparent clones. It could be the perfect opportunity to escape, but Spinner didn't take his eyes off him as a good guard dog, and Izuku feared the consequences of being found on the run. He didn't want to end up like that group Shigaraki disintegrated. He saw Toga surrounded by the army members and felt sorry for her. Yes, she was a villain, but she hadn't had a choice but to succumb to bloodlust. Were quirks capable of dictating people's behavior? Yes, but it wasn't a general rule. Are quirks capable of hurting their user? Definitely yes. Izuku began to wonder what would have happened if Toga's parents had allowed her to drink blood, only supporting a physiological need and perhaps psychiatric help, instead of trying to appear what they considered normal. He didn't know if it was his imagination or it was real. He saw Uraraka emerge from the rubble with tears in her eyes and a desperate expression. His hopes were crushed when he caught a glimpse of the girl wearing Toga's clothes and holding a dagger in her hands as she sped through people, killing them. He heard the FING reporter giving a big speech and getting ready to attack Toga when the girl got close enough to touch her. And then he saw the woman floating in the air. Toga looked simultaneously between her hands and the reporter. A smile broke out on her face, and she ran between the soldiers, touching them and making them float. The realization hit Izuku hard. Some quirks arise from situations that threaten the physical and mental health of the user. The purest example of human evolution and adaptation. The body and genetics struggle to stay alive. Aren't humans wonderful? What the F dash? Izuku shrieked as he saw Toga's face fragmented. Half was Uraraka's face, brown hair, and eyes with rosy cheeks. The other was pale-skinned with golden eyes and blonde hair. Toga's smile didn't diminish but widened. I'm gonna be normal in my own way, she stated before steepling her fingers. Within seconds, blood stained the pavement. There's no going back once you guys get out, Dunce's face calmly stated as he bowed his head on the way out. Copycat nodded. You will officially be on our side. Katsuki didn't care at all. The three of them had come here for a reason, and they weren't going to abandon their purpose. In conflict with the League. Katsuki clarified. We save Izuku and then we do like this. His finger twirled in the air. Was just a coincidence, we'll give you time to run away, and we won't say anything. It's a fair deal. Copycat accepted along with Dunce's face. Let's go. Hello people. I have decided to abandon this work because it no longer inspires me to write it and I have other projects. It was a difficult decision because I always have a special attachment to my stories. If you're curious about the ending, I'll tell you. All for One would appear during the Tamura vs. Redestro battle and would try to make Izuku use damage control to avoid getting hurt, but Izuku refused to use it, causing him to build up a lot of destructive energy. At that moment, Hitoshi, Mei, and Katsuki would find him and tell him to leave, but Izuku looks them in the eye and tells them that there is no other option and asks them to leave him. They refuse and Izuku, knowing they were going to die, thanks them for everything and forgives Katsuki. Izuku closes his eyes as they hug. Izuku thinks about how he always focused on others, but never on himself, and that it was hard to find people who genuinely care about him, but in the end, he found incredible people who tried to save him. This is the story of Midoriya Izuku, the boy. Not the hero. Not the villain. Not damage control. Not the normal. Just a boy. A massive explosion would kill everyone in Daika, including the newly arrived heroes, Aizawa, Hawks, Fat Gum, etc. The end would show the list of missing, that is, they were dead, and the last name would be Midoriya Izuku. Thank you very much to those who are reading this story. I apologize for leaving it like this. Thank you very much to those who supported me in this story. I hope to see you in future works. Take care. Drink water. Bye. 3.